Hey everyone, Firescale Audiobooks here. If you'd like to request updates on any novel, consider becoming a Patreon or Ko-fi member. Based on your membership tier, I'll create additional parts for the novel you're interested in. Normally, I'll only upload 4 to 5 parts of each novel due to limited time. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It really helps.
After taking a few minutes to gather herself, Meng Jia began recalling all the things Tang Hu had done to her to Su Yang, while Qin Yu went outside to leave them alone. His behavior seemed normal at first, and I'd thought that he wanted to change things up when he started being rougher during our cultivation. However, as the days passed, he quickly became more aggressive and violent. Initially, I believed his unusual behavior was due to stress or something similar, so I didn't say anything and endured it. But things changed when he started beating me without holding back, and he'd even started shouting nonsense like someone in frenzy. What kind of nonsense was he shouting? Su Yang suddenly cut in to ask. Meng Jia looked hesitant to reply at first, but Su Yang's intense gazes quickly changed her mind. He was shouting things like, "I won't ever hand you over to that bastard Su Yang," said Meng Jia, feeling awkward and embarrassed from the sentence. "So it is because of that, huh?" Su Yang sighed inwardly. He instantly understood the situation, as he has encountered similar events multiple times in his past life, where people would become paranoid and insecure because of his mere presence, pushing them into doing things that they normally wouldn't think about. He also said things like, Su Yang suddenly raised his hands and he said, "Enough, I have heard enough to understand the situation. Although I cannot compensate you for the pain you had to endure because of me, I will deal with Tang Hu to make sure he will never hurt you again, as that is the least I can do." He apologized to her despite taking no part in this fiasco except by just existing. What do you plan on doing to him, if you don't mind me asking?" Meng Jia asked with a concerned expression. "Are you going to tell the sect about him? Or will you?" While the thought of Su Yang risking his life by killing a fellow disciple just to avenge her was laughable, Meng Jia couldn't help but feel that such a thought was also in Su Yang's mind. "Do you have a problem with me killing him?" Su Yang suddenly said in a calm voice, dumbfounding her. Meng Jia's eyes widened from shock and her body trembled. Although she has come to despise Tang Hu from this incident, somewhere in her heart was still trying to seek forgiveness for him without actually being aware. Perhaps it was because of the time they'd spent together, or maybe because there was a part of her that still loved him, but she simply didn't want Tang Hu to die because of this incident. And naturally, Su Yang was able to see this reluctance within her. "I see." Su Yang no longer felt like staying in this place and stood up to leave, where Chen Yu was patiently waiting outside for the two of them to finish. "Wait." Meng Jia quickly stopped him. "Although what he did was terrible, I can tell that he's also feeling pain." "Pain?" Su Yang coldly sneered. He then turned to look at Meng Jia in the eyes and said, "That man has already lost his mind from cultivating a depraved technique, and you still want to protect him after all he's done to you? How foolish." Meng Jia trembled violently at his clearly displeased tone, and she sat there silently with a blank face, looking perplexed. A moment later, with a nonchalant expression, Su Yang spoke. "Can you walk?" "Fifth." "Then follow me," he said as he walked out the door. "Eh? Where are we going?" "To visit Tang Hu, obviously." Meng Jia stared at him with wide eyes, looking baffled and terrified at the same time. Why would he take her to Tang Hu now? Light's novel. "Shem? You're done?" Chen Yu asked him when the door opened. "Lights vlamikronem." Then she noticed Meng Jia, who was walking behind him, and her eyes widened with shock. "Sister Meng, are you sure you should be standing, much less walking?" "Don't worry about me, I am fine," Meng Jia said with a bitter smile. "I have to go somewhere with Su Yang now, so I will be leaving now." "What?" Chen Yu looked extremely puzzled at this moment. What happened during their talk for this to be happening? Through a moment of silence, Su Yang continued to walk, and Meng Jia followed him. "Sister Chen, please, this is very important." Chen Yu sighed and nodded a bit later. "Hurry up and come back to rest, okay?" Because she didn't want to attract attention with the obvious bruises on her face, Meng Jia covered her face with a veil before leaving the house. After they left, Su Yang brought her directly back to his living quarters. Once they arrived, Meng Jia received cold feet and couldn't approach the house unless she was standing close to Su Yang with her hands tightly grasping onto his sleeves, looking like a terrified child in front of a scary monster. Upon entering the house, Su Yang brought her directly to stand in front of the door to Tang Hu's room. "Do we really have to do this?" Meng Jia asked in a mosquito-like voice, clearly afraid that Tang Hu might be able to hear her voice from behind the doors. Su Yang smiled and he suddenly shouted, "Tang Hu, I know that you are cultivating a depraved technique. You have 3 seconds to get out of your room before I start making love to your beloved Meng Jia here right outside of your room. Not that I haven't done it already." "What?" Meng Jia experienced the scare of her life after listening to Su Yang's bold announcement, and she quickly began making a run for the door. But alas, Su Yang swiftly reacted by grabbing her by the waist and pulling her directly into his embrace. "Tang Hu, aren't you scared that I will take her from you? I am removing her clothes even as I speak." Su Yang then looked at Meng Jia, who was still in his embrace, with a passionate gaze along with a charming smile, and said, "Don't worry, I will be gentle, unlike a certain individual." Almost instantly after Su Yang said those words, the door to Tang Hu's room violently opened, and Tang Hu appeared before them with red eyes and bulging veins all over his body. When Tang Hu noticed Su Yang embracing Meng Jia, whose face was bright red from blushing, he roared like a vicious animal filled with rage. "I will fucking kill you." Su Yang smiled when Tang Hu reacted to his provoking just like he'd expected. With his arms wrapped intimately around Meng Jia's body, he spoke, "What a foolish man you are, Tang Hu. Because you were paranoid about a problem that never existed, you have not only made that unexisting problem a reality, but you have also harmed your partner physically and mentally. If you weren't so foolish and insecure, then she wouldn't be in my arms right now, but yours." "Yeah." Tang Hu began beating his chest like a gorilla, and his eyes turned crimson red in bloodlust. His skin was also darkened to the point that it was gray in color, almost like elephant skin. This moment, Tang Hu no longer resembled a human but more of a demonic being instead. "What a pity." Su Yang shook his head in silence. "Tang Hu." Tears began forming in Meng Jia's eyes when she looked at Tang Hu, whose appearance resembled a monster. "This is what happens when you cultivate a depraved technique. You cut all your connections to the human realm and lose your humanity, becoming a depraved creature," said Su Yang, his expression calm despite the grave situation. "Leave if you do not want to see him die before your eyes. Is there really no other way? There must be something we can do to help him." Meng Jia cried out, clearly unwilling to see him die despite the terror he acted upon her. Su Yang remained silent. There are indeed methods that could still save Tang Hu even in his current state. However, such methods required resources and effort. It was something Su Yang wasn't willing to expend for a person like Tang Hu. "I will not repeat myself. Leave while you can," he said again. Meng Jia looked at Tang Hu's face one last time before nodding and turning to run outside. When Tang Hu noticed her movements, he pounced towards her to prevent her from escaping. "Where do you think you are going, Meng Jia?" he roared. Suddenly, Su Yang disappeared from his original spot and appeared before Tang Hu like a ghost. "And where do you think you are going?" Su Yang waved his sleeves, and a loud slap resounded an instant later. "Pa!" Tang Hu was sent flying backward by a casual slap from Su Yang, who was at the true spirit realm. Even if your cultivation base is increased by another tenfolds, you are still at the elementary spirit realm, not even qualified to fight those at the profound spirit realm, let alone me. Tang Hu coughed up a mouthful of blood from the impact of the slap. Although it seemed like a casual slap to the face, the force of that slap was strong enough to send him flying like a rag doll, and that caused a fearful feeling to appear deep in his heart. "Heya!" he roared, trying to scream the feeling of fear out of his body. A moment later, Tang Hu pounced at Su Yang again. "Humph, what a waste of my time." Su Yang shook his head and sighed. "Chua." He suddenly called for her. An instant later, the door to his room abruptly opened, and a beauty that resembled a real goddess appeared from the room. When Chua emerged from Su Yang's room, Tang Hu's movements spontaneously froze. Despite his lack of ability to think or reason, Tang Hu couldn't help but stare at Chua's peerless face and graceful figure with a dazed expression, his red eyes seemingly mesmerized by her beauty. Su Yang raised an eyebrow at the situation. As expected of Yuhai's daughter, huh? Even her ability to charm men is similarly devastating. Light's novel. Chua's otherworldly beauty had managed to captivate Tang Hu, who had long lost his mind and ability to think. Why did you call for me, father? Surely you can handle this ant by yourself. Chua looked at him and said, sounding puzzled. I don't want to stain this house with his blood, but alas, I am not at the level where I can erase someone without causing a bloody mess, he said with a regretful tone. Chua looked at him with an unbelievable face. After a moment of silence, she spoke. I can take care of him for you, but you will explain to me your relationship with that little girl just now and how far you have gone with her. Su Yang smiled bitterly and said, There is nothing between us, and I doubt that even you were fooled by my little act just now. Humph. I just wanted to make sure, she said with a cute pouting expression. A moment later, Chua narrowed her gaze, and a tyrannical pressure suddenly forced the still dazed Tang Hu to drop to the floor with his face kissing the ground. Lights flamikronem. With a cold expression on her flawless face, she spoke. Disappear, you insignificant ant. Suddenly, a small silver flame the size of a candle fire appeared directly on Tang Hu's forehead. This small flame quickly expanded, and within seconds consumed Tang Hu's entire body. Hush! Tang Hu rolled around on the floor while screaming in agony, trying to disperse the flame, but alas, the silver fire continued to burn lively. And strangely, the silver flame did not spread outside of Tang Hu's body when he rolled around, nor did it burn anything besides his body. When Su Yang first noticed the silver fire, a glint of surprise flickered within his eyes. Everlasting sacred fire. He easily recognized the type of fire Chua was using, as her mother also cultivated the same technique. It was a terrifying technique that cultivates a profound fire that would not stop burning until its target completely disappears, leaving not even the ashes behind. And within seconds, Tang Hu's body was reduced to being nothing. His entire existence had been erased by the everlasting sacred fire, leaving not even a speck of ash behind. I'm surprised, Su Yang suddenly said. He looked at Chua with a proud look on his face and continued, I have known you since you were a baby, and you were cultivating a different technique prior to my departure. But now, out of all the profound techniques that you could have cultivated from the Sacred Moon Palace, you decided to change to the everlasting sacred fire technique that your mother also cultivated. Why? It's simple, because my mother treasured this technique more than any techniques that were available at the Sacred Moon Palace, she replied. Then what do you think of the technique? Do you like it? I love it, she instantly replied with a beautiful smile. Although it may not be as strong as the strongest techniques within the Sacred Moon Palace, I feel the most comfortable when cultivating the everlasting sacred fire. Is that so? Said Su Yang, showing a tender smile. What is it? Chua said, looking puzzled by his reaction. Well, you see, that technique was a gift to your mother from me, he said, shocking Chua, who never learned the origin of the technique. Father gave this technique to mother, she mumbled. The everlasting sacred fire is an ancient grade technique that I had created solely for Yuehai as a symbol of my eternal love for her. Su Yang expressed melancholy, his gaze seemingly distant. Chua remained silent. It was no wonder why her mother had treated this technique with great love and care. But why did mother give me this technique before she passed away? Chua silently looked at the ball of silver flame that was flickering on her palms like a candle fire, her gaze filled with uncertainty. How much of the technique have you comprehended so far? Su Yang suddenly asked her. Only the beginning stages, she replied in a regretful tone. That's pretty decent for someone at your level, Su Yang nodded with approval. It seems like you have inherited more than just your mother's beautiful appearance. What do you mean by that? She looked at him with a puzzled face. The everlasting sacred fire was created with everything I knew about Yuehai in mind, so you can say that it was a technique tailored to match her aptitude, making her the only person in this world who can possibly comprehend and fully master it. Since you are able to use the technique that was only meant for Yuehai, it means that you also have what is required to learn the technique, just like your mother, Suyang explained to her. Chua stood there silently, seemingly in shock. After listening to Su Yang's explanation, Chua was more shocked at the fact that he was able to create a technique at the ancient grade that was tailored for a single person. Creating cultivation techniques itself required immense talent, let alone creating a cultivation technique that was specifically meant for one individual in the world, and for Su Yang to achieve such a feat, his talent could only be considered abnormal. It should also be mentioned that cultivation techniques almost never discriminate against anyone who wishes to learn their secrets, so whoever has the ability to comprehend its contents would be able to master it as long as they were capable. However, a cultivation technique that was made so that only one person in the world could comprehend was something Chua has never heard of. Just what kind of existence was Su Yang back in the four divine heavens? Other than the things she'd learned about him from the time she spent with him, Chua only knew Su Yang as a mentor and an esteemed guest at the Sacred Moon Palace, who later also became a father figure to her, but that was about the limit of her knowledge regarding his background. Her mother, Yuehai, also almost never spoke of Su Yang's background outside of the Sacred Moon Palace, nor his real relationship with her. Hell, the only time Chua ever really learned something about Su Yang was after his death, when her mother shared with her some of her memories with Su Yang out of grief and loneliness. Su Yang suddenly approached her and lifted her hands, and he spoke as he stared at the silver flame flickering on her hands. When I have a chance, I will give you guidance to help you better understand the everlasting sacred fire. Chua slowly nodded with a slightly rosy face. Su Yang then turned to look at the Spot Tang, who disappeared from with a pondering expression. I never got the chance to figure out how he'd obtained the depraved technique. Was it given to him, or did he stumble it by chance? Through a short moment of pondering, he shrugged his shoulders, clearly uninterested by his situation. Light's novel. Many minutes had passed since Meng Jia stared waiting outside the house, yet there was no sign of Su Yang appearing anytime soon. 'Cause these houses are covered in soundproof barriers, she was unable to hear the commotion inside the house. However, this silence only made her even more anxious. What was happening inside? Is Tang Hu still alive, or is he long dead by the hands of Su Yang? What if Su Yang was the one in trouble? Dozens of questions appeared in Meng Jia's head, each one making her desire to return inside a little bit stronger. Lights fell. And finally, after a few more minutes, the door opened. Su Yang emerged an instant later, his expression calm and without a single hint of distress. Meng Jia looked at him with a puzzled expression. Why does he look so tranquil at this moment, making it seem as though nothing had happened inside? What happened to Tang Hu? She asked him after a moment of silence. Su Yang did not reply to her question and only beckoned her to come back into the house. Once Meng Jia entered the house, she was dumbfounded by the scene. Besides a tiny puddle of blood that was on the floor, there was not even a slight hint of Tang Hu being there, almost as though his existence had been erased. Where's Tang Hu? Meng Jia asked, her heart overwhelmed with a strong sense of unease. He's dead, said Su Yang without any excuses. When Meng Jia heard his nonchalant words, her body trembled, and she dropped to her knees with tears flowing down both sides of her face as she wept her heart out. What am I supposed to do now with him gone? I have only ever been with him ever since I joined this sect with him 1 year ago, Meng Jia said as she stared at Su Yang with sorrowful eyes, looking as if she wanted him to help her decide. That is not something for me to decide, said Su Yang after a moment of silence. Life is always full of unknown paths, each with sorrowful moments waiting for you at some point. Although I cannot help you decide your life, feel free to look for me if you need guidance at any time while I am still here. A moment after he said those words, Meng Jia, still with tears flowing down her cheeks, spoke. What about things besides guidance? Can I come to you for other things too? She asked him with a glint of desperation in her eyes. Su Yang smiled, but just as he opened his mouth to speak, the atmosphere suddenly became unpleasant and gloomy. The smile on Su Yang's handsome face instantly turned into a bitter smile, and he glanced at his own room with the corner of his eyes, where Chua was clearly watching their interaction with her spiritual sense. If you need anything, even if that something is as small as a chat over some tea, I will gladly be there. However, you should leave those thoughts till after you fully recover, said Su Yang after a moment of silence. Meng Jia nodded, and a few minutes later she quietly made her way back home, where Chen Yu was anxiously waiting for her. Once she was fully out of the picture, Su Yang went back into his room. I really despise this place, Chua said to him the moment he entered the room. With a smile, Su Yang spoke. You will quickly get used to it. But I don't want to get used to this place. Why are we even here? Since Father has me now, we can go anywhere we want in this world, so why don't we just leave this place that stinks of impurity? Su Yang shook his head and said calmly, My ultimate goal is to return to the four divine heavens, but neither of us have any knowledge as to how to get there, and you have already traveled the entire world. Until we find a way to return to the four divine heavens, it does not matter if I am here or at another place, as it is all the same at the end of the day. Additionally, there are still a few things I'd like to do here before leaving. If I don't do these things and just leave, it will affect my Tao heart for future breakthroughs. This profound blossom sect is also a great place for me to increase my cultivation base quickly without harming my foundations. Not to mention this place's environment really suits a scoundrel like me, he added, causing Chua to sigh with a dejected expression. What would Mother do if she was in this situation, she wondered. Chua, do you happen to have any appearance-reforming pills? Su Yang suddenly asked her. Appearance-reforming pills? I do have some, but why do you need them? She asked in a curious tone. Appearance-reforming pills are just as it sounds. It has the ability to change an individual's appearance temporarily, altering the face entirely and becoming a new individual with a new identity. These pills are commonly used in the cultivation world where quarrels and skirmishes occur every day, and cultivators would more often than not disguise themselves using the appearance-reforming pills in order to make it more difficult for others to find them. As for Chuyue, who possesses otherworldly beauty and a profound presence, she would normally travel while under disguise to avoid unnecessary attention from the masses. However, the appearance-reforming pills are not without flaws, as it could easily be bypassed by those with higher cultivation bases or those with sharp senses. So I can cause trouble without being recognized, he said with a grin. Chua stared at him with a weird look on her face. And after a moment of awkward silence, she retrieved a small black pill from her storage ring and handed it to Su Yang. The moment he received the appearance-reforming pill, Su Yang threw the pill into his mouth and swallowed it. An instant later, his handsome face began twisting with his young body also growing taller, looking as though there was a pair of invisible hands playing with his face. After another moment, Su Yang's no longer looked like a handsome young man but a handsome middle-aged man instead. This middle-aged man had fierce eyes, sword-like eyebrows, a straight nose, and gave off the feeling of an intimidating ruler. If Su Yang were to walk around in this world with his new face, then it was guaranteed that nobody would recognize him. But if he went into the streets of the four divine heavens with such a face, then he was basically asking for trouble. When Chua saw his new appearance, her eyes widened from shock. The Heavenly Emperor, she exclaimed loudly, her voice even trembling from the bewilderment. Ugly looking, right? I know. Su Yang chuckled, but since he was using the Heavenly Emperor's face, Chua found it extremely unpleasant, even intimidating. I am speechless, she shook her head. Are you not afraid of offending the heavens for using His Majesty, the Heavenly Emperor's face? Not to mention that you'll also be causing trouble with such a face. You will get struck by lightning at this rate. Chua expressed her worries, as it was considered a heavenly offense to use the Heavenly Emperor's face in any way, shape, or form, much less to cause trouble. What is that old man going to do, come here and arrest me again? Su Yang laughed, his laughter carrying slight malice. Clearly, Su Yang held a grudge towards the Heavenly Emperor from being thrown into the eternal retribution cliff by him, and he wanted to get revenge no matter how small the details may be. Chua could only sigh at his behavior, thinking that even someone like him has his childish moments. "What about your clothes?" she then asked. "You look ridiculous in those robes that were clearly meant for your previous and smaller figure." "There's no need to change it," he quickly replied. "The worse I look while using this face, the better it makes me feel." "You really are helpless." Shua shook her head. "Lights flamikronem." "Right, let me take a look inside your storage ring again," he suddenly said. Shua didn't even bother asking why before giving him her storage ring. After looking through the storage ring for a few moments, Su Yang nodded with a satisfied expression. Many hours have passed since Su Yang consumed the appearance-reforming pill, yet he remained inside his room the entire time. It was not until the stars began twinkling did Su Yang finally decide it was time to leave his room. "Do you need me to come with you?" Shua asked him before he left the house. "It's only someone at the Earth Spirit realm, nothing I cannot deal with by myself," he said with a smile before disappearing into the night. Perhaps that's the reason he was thrown into the eternal retribution cliff in the first place? Because he nonchalantly uses His Majesty, the Heavenly Emperor's face all the time, she silently wondered as her spiritual sense activated to follow Su Yang. When Su Yang sensed a pair of invisible eyes watching him from afar, he smiled inwardly. That girl worries too much. But since I am probably the only person left in this universe that she currently trusts, I won't say anything about it. Su Yang traversed the dark profound blossom sect with his 9 astral steps, appearing and disappearing in the shadows like a ghost. His destination was clear. It was the Yin Yang Pavilion where the current sect masters resided. I should have asked someone for their location. Su Yang face-bombed after realizing that he had no idea where they were located. Suddenly, his eyes began glowing gold, looking as though 2 golden suns came to life inside his eyes. Light's novel. That spot has the presence of 2 Earth Spirit Realm experts, so they are probably there. Within seconds, Su Yang was able to locate the Yin Yang Pavilion with his all-seeing celestial eyes, a profound technique that could allow the user to look at stars from millions of kilometers away with their naked eyes when completely mastered. Once he'd guessed their location, his figure flickered and disappeared like a ghost, appearing into the distance many houses away in the next instant. A few minutes later, Su Yang stood atop a tall and luxurious 4-story tall pavilion that emitted high-quality profound chi that could not be found anywhere else within the sect. As expected of the home to the sect masters, the quality of profound chi found here is far superior to any other hotspots found in this profound blossom sect. If he cultivated here with lawn leeching, then he's almost certain that he'll reach the Earth Spirit Realm within half a year's time, perhaps even higher. It's decided. I will take this Yin Yang Pavilion for myself when I get the chance. After that silent promise to himself, Su Yang began snooping around the place to look for a certain individual. Inside the Yin Yang Pavilion, 2 figures were together inside a room with dimly illuminated light. These 2 figures were obviously the matriarch and the patriarch, and they had just finished their daily cultivation. "What's wrong, Lu Lanji? You seemed disheartened during our cultivation," said the patriarch in a puzzled tone. "Disheartened?" Lu Lanji looked at him with a nonchalant face, sighing inwardly. "I think the term bored would be better suited for my mood right now," she said. "Be bored." Although the patriarch already knew that, he continued to play dumb to avoid embarrassing himself. Lu Lanji left the bed and got dressed before walking to the window to stare at the night sky with a dazed expression. After a moment of silence, she turned around to look at the patriarch and said in a calm yet cold voice, "Do not be mistaken, Li Chang, your techniques are great, but I am no longer satisfied with your techniques." "What?" Li Chang's eyes popped out of his sockets at her words. How could that be possible? She was still enjoying his techniques just yesterday. How could her body possibly change so much in a single day, to the point where she could no longer feel satisfaction from him? "You are not satisfied with my performances tonight? I do not believe it. Lose your clothes and we will do it again." Li Chang's pride and ego took a huge hit from her words, but he wasn't convinced. Lu Lanji slowly shook her head and said, Forget it, I am already saving you face by being lenient with my words. How am I supposed to forget this? Li Chong suddenly roared in anger, his fist deeply embedded into the bed. Not only was his pride as a man greatly damaged by her words, but his position as the patriarch would also become at risk if he really could no longer satisfy the matriarch. While the majority believed that the patriarch would have the final say within the Profound Blossom sect, the truth was actually the total opposite, as it has always been the matriarch who's in full control of the Profound Blossom sect since the founding of the sect. And if the patriarch, who was chosen by the matriarch, could no longer satisfy her, then it was obvious that a new patriarch, one who could satisfy the matriarch in her cultivation, would be selected for the sect. I do not believe that I am unable to satisfy your body anymore. Hurry and get back on the bed, Lu Longji. He continued to speak loudly, his voice filled with anger and embarrassment. Lu Longji suddenly frowned and her gaze sharpened at Li Chong. Who do you think you are talking to with that tone, Li Chong? She suddenly snapped back, startling him. Do I have to remind you who's the true sect master of the sect? I. Get lost. And until you improve your trash techniques, I do not want you in my room, she said with her finger pointed to the door, her narrowed eyes glaring daggers at him. Afraid of her short temper, Li Chong hastily scrambled out of the bed and ran out of the room naked, even leaving his clothes in her room. Once he left, Lu Longji coldly snorted and returned sat on her bed to cultivate. But alas, her mind could not be calmed even after many minutes and her heart was wavering, so she quickly gave up trying to cultivate and went straight to sleep. However, even then, she was having difficulties sleeping. Damn it! This is all his fault. Of course, my body is not satisfied. After experiencing that from him, there is no way I will be able to feel stimulation by normal means anymore, and today's cultivation with Li Chong proved that perfectly. Lu Longji rolled around in her warm bed in frustration. After her experience with Li Chong tonight, she finally realized just how far and distant Li Chong's techniques were when compared to Su Yang. It was a feeling akin to eating dog food right after savoring luxurious food meant for divine beings. And as the night passed, Lu Longji began feeling regret that she didn't extend the assessment and had only managed to cultivate with Su Yang for a mere few minutes. Inside his own room that was only one floor below Lu Longji's room, Li Chong vented his anger by destroying what little furniture he had inside the room the moment he returned. Fuck. 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 What do you mean by not satisfied with my performance? I was even feeling more energized tonight than normal, yet the results were worse than the last time? I don't fucking believe it. Li Chong exclaimed in a furious manner, feeling as though he'd been humiliated. After venting for a few moments, Li Chong suddenly looked enlightened. What if she only said that as a mean to find a new patriarch because she is bored of me? He thought to himself. That's right. My technique couldn't possibly be trash. She's afraid because I am quickly overtaking her with my superior talent. Li Chong quickly convinced himself that Lu Longji was trying to remove him as the patriarch to find another one, and being the egotistic person that he is, there was no way that he'd sit still until that would eventually happen. I am only one level beneath her in cultivation. If I cultivate quickly enough and surpass her before she replaces me, then I will not only retain my position as the patriarch, but I will also obtain full control of the sect. With that in mind, Li Chong began thinking of ways to quickly raise his cultivation base. And within seconds, a thought came to his head. That's it. Although she's only at the true spirit realm, that Elder Lawn still has her Een essence. If I take her Een essence, then my cultivation base will surely greatly advance, he mumbled out loud from excitement. Li Chong began making his way to the door, but just as he took his first step towards the door, the window violently opened, and a tall figure jumped into the room through the window. When he first saw this intruder, Li Chong was alarmed by his sudden entrance, only to be bewildered by his absurd appearance an instant later. The intruder was a handsome middle-aged man with sharp features, looking like a natural-born ruler. However, not only was he wearing white robes that only outer court disciples from the Profound Blossom sect would normally wear, but the robes were also clearly too small to fit his large figure, making him look quite ridiculous, even like a pervert to some extent. Who the hell are you? Li Chang cried out with alarm. A messenger from heaven, said Su Yang jokingly in a disguised voice. What nonsense are you spouting? Li Chang looked at him with ridicule like he was looking at a clown. I didn't come here to kill you at first, but after hearing your mumble, I've decided that it would be better to kill you after all. Li Chang looked dazed for a moment before bursting with laughter. I don't know which circus you came from, nor why you are here in the first place, but if you think that I will let you kill me and leave after intruding my room like this, then you really are a clown, a foolish clown. Pretty big talk for someone who just got scolded by his woman for being useless. Su Yang laughed without reserve, causing Li Chang's face to flush red from anger. If I don't kill you tonight, then I am not a man. Li Chang roared, his forehead filled with veins of rage. Seeing his eagerness to fight, Su Yang casually shrugged his shoulders with a smile on his face. I am pretty confident that you have already exhausted a good amount of your profound qi after your cultivation tonight. When Li Chang heard Su Yang's words, his complexion instantly paled, looking as though he'd just swallowed something filthy. He then touched the ring on his hand, and a steel sword that radiated with profound qi emerged from within the ring and into his grasp. A spirit-grade spiritual treasure? Do you really believe that some rubbish toothpick will save you from me? Su Yang scoffed as he slowly approached Li Chang with empty hands. His actions caused Li Chang to be taken aback. Does he really think that he can fight me, who has a spiritual weapon, empty-handed? He inwardly sneered at Su Yang's arrogance, but the ominous feeling that was weighing down his heart did not disappear and instead continued to increase as Su Yang got closer. Die for me, 8-point strike. When Su Yang reached a certain distance from him, Li Chang suddenly thrust his sword forward at a speed that made it seem like there were 8 swords heading towards Su Yang instead of just one. What cheap tricks! When the sword was seemingly an instant away from piercing a hole between his brows, Su Yang's hands vanished from his sides and appeared before his face to catch one of the 8 strikes, ignoring the remaining 7. What lights novel? Before he could penetrate Su Yang's skin with his sword, Li Chang suddenly felt as though he'd struck a steel wall and his sword would not move forward even the slightest no matter how much he pushed or pulled. It was as if he had stabbed the ground so hard that his sword was stuck inside the dirt, yet what he aimed his sword at was not the ground but the middle-aged man in front of him. Li Chang was dumbfounded for an instant, but when he realized what had happened, all the hair on his body stood up like spikes on a certain rodent. Indeed, what the people say about the profound Blossom sect having only high cultivation bases and lacking in techniques is true and not one bit misleading, said Su Yang, who was currently holding Li Chang's sword with only 2 fingers, even looking a bit bored of the situation. I am possible. After struggling for a moment and realizing that his sword would not budge unless Su Yang released his fingers, Li Chang willingly removed his grip from the sword and slowly staggered backward. In his mind, he was shocked speechless at the clear disparity between their strength that was like heaven and earth. At your current condition, you are equal to someone at the middle stages of the true spirit realm at best, not even worth my effort. Su Yang directly threw Li Chang's spiritual treasure into his storage ring the moment he released his grip on the handle, stealing it for himself. 'Cause Li Chang had just finished cultivating with Lu Lanji, his cultivation base was exhausted. And Su Yang, who cultivated his physique to the late stages of the profound spirit realm with one of the best body refining techniques in the world, he was capable of taking care of the weakened Li Chang without the assistance of his cultivation base at the true spirit realm. While body refiners are too few and far between in the cultivation world due to the harsh cultivating methods being too difficult for the majority to endure, they are also the strongest type of cultivators when in close combat with a prowess that could easily overwhelm any qi refiners that are 1, even 2 realms above them if the technique they used is of superior quality. And at Su Yang's current state, he has the capabilities to fight someone at the earth spirit realm with his physical body alone, and perhaps even heavenly spirit realm if he used his entire cultivation base. As such, dealing with Li Chang, who is not only weakened but also an earth spirit realm master, Su Yang naturally wouldn't have any problems with him in close combat. Who are you? Why are you doing this? I do not recall ever offending someone like you. Li Chang began sweating profusely once he realized that he stood no chance against this mysterious intruder, especially not when he was in a weakened state. Hell, even if he was in top condition, he still wouldn't dare say with confidence that he could fight Su Yang survive, much less come out as victorious. You didn't offend me directly, but when you decided to lay hands on her, your fate has already been dictated by the heavens, said Su Yang as he began taking steps towards the trembling Li Chang. Lights flamikronem. Her? Who are you referring to by her? I don't even remember. Li Chang's expression suddenly froze, and the image of Elder Lan emerged from his chaotic mind. Elder Lan? Are you talking about Elder Lan? Why, you can have her. If you spare my life today, I will never look at her again, much less think about touching her. I am the patriarch of this sect. If I die, although he was puzzled by Lan Liqing's relationship with this mysterious intruder with profound strength, he wasn't in the situation to think about it properly and begged for his life instead. Su Yang suddenly burst out laughing, and he spoke in a slow and calm manner. I don't need your permission to take her, as you can't give me what is already mine. He then raised his hand and aimed for Li Chang's heart with a palming strike. Soul-sealing palm strike. The strike landed directly on Li Chang's chest an instant later, and he stared at the heavenly emperor's face before him with hatred while he slowly fell to the ground, until the life in his dimly lit eyes vanished like the light of a blown-out candle. Su Yang silently watched as Li Chang's lifeless body lay slump on the floor, his gaze as tranquil as a still lake, looking as though the situation couldn't affect him even the slightest. I had only planned to give you a warning tonight, but seeing how you were so eager to get yourself killed, I went ahead and fulfilled your wish. Su Yang shook his head and turned to approach the window. However, just as he was about to leave, the door to the room violently opened, and Lu Longji walked inside while yelling, Why the hell are you making so much noise in the middle of the night? I will fucking kill you, Li Chang. Lu Longji was already aggravated by her inability to sleep, yet she still had to listen to the commotion in this room, but her expression and lips quickly froze when she saw the situation. The first thing she'd noticed was the handsome middle-aged man because of his absurd and staggering appearance. She then noticed Li Chang's lifeless body on the floor with blood dripping from his lips, looking as though he'd sustained grave injuries. Who are you? Lu Longji was on guard after a quick observation of the scene, her hands already touching her storage ring in preparation for battle. However, she did not immediately attack Su Yang and only stood there, looking apprehensive. Although Li Chang was below her in terms of his cultivation base, he was still one of the top experts in this sect, yet for him to be dealt with so quickly and efficiently by this middle-aged man, Lu Longji did not dare to overestimate her abilities by attacking him without knowing anything about his identity. Relax, little girl. I came here tonight only for that fool who is already dead on the floor, said Su Yang with one leg on the window. Little girl. Lu Longji frowned. While her appearance resembles that of a young lady who is still in her prime, she is actually well over 80 years old. Su Yang noticed the anger in her eyes when he treated her like a little girl despite her efforts in hiding it, and he smiled and continued. Perhaps if you manage to live another 1,000 years, I will consider calling you a young girl. Lu Longji was more shocked than offended this time around. Someone who is 1,000 years old was only a young girl in his eyes? Just how long has he been alive thus far? What cultivation base could he possibly have achieved to have such a long lifespan? It was something that she couldn't even mentally fathom since Earth Spirit Realm experts like her normally have a lifespan around 300 to 400 years. Why would someone as profound as you appear here to kill someone small like Li Chang? Lu Longji suddenly asked him. He was the patriarch of this sect, you know? How am I supposed to explain this to the sect? Despite Li Chang's death, Lu Longji didn't seem to display any signs of grief for him, which made Su Yang feel a bit surprised. I killed him because he laughed at my appearance while I was passing through, said Su Yang with a serious expression, dumbfounding Lu Longji, who clearly wasn't expecting such an answer. Be because he laughed at you? For him to kill a patriarch like Li Chang over such a ludicrous reason, Lu Longji no longer doubted his old age, as only those old monsters with prolonged life and a deep cultivation base could possibly exhibit such eccentric behavior. Do you have a problem with that, little girl? Su Yang removed his leg from the window and slowly approached her in an overbearing manner. Lu Longji instinctively retreated a few steps when Su Yang's overwhelming pressure filled the room, her back soaked in cold sweat. I had planned on replacing him when I find a better candidate anyway, and he was at fault for offending Senior, so I have no problem with Senior's decision. Instead, I would like to thank Senior for assisting me in dealing with him, even though it wasn't Senior's original intent. Lu Longji said with a bow, thanking him for killing Li Chong. Su Yang halted his steps and nodded his head with approval, acting like a profound old man. "Very well, I accept your gratitude," he said a moment later. "Although I didn't plan to cause trouble for your sect, my actions have done exactly that, so my humble self shall compensate for your lost Lights novel. Senior need not worry about such minor details," Lu Longji suddenly said, her forehead dripping with sweat. Although it would be rude to refuse his offer, Lu Longji didn't want to accept compensation from someone who just killed the patriarch of her own sect, afraid that his offer might do more harm than good, not to mention his fearsome presence that was forcing her to sweat buckets from just his presence alone. Having his offer refused, Su Yang frowned, deliberately looking offended despite feeling calm inwardly. "You are refusing my goodwill? It's been over 4,000 years since someone had last refused my generosity." Lu Longji trembled violently upon hearing his low voice that was spoken in a displeased tone, and her legs were even shaking clearly from the killing intent that radiated from Su Yang's narrowed gaze. "FF 4,000 years!" Lu Longji exclaimed inwardly, nearly screaming out loud. What cultivation base would one need to have be able to live for over 4,000 years and still look so young and energetic? By now, Lu Longji was sweating so much that the spot she stood was covered in liquid, making it seem like she'd just pissed herself. To be leaking at your age, you really are a little girl." Su Yang continued to tease her while recalling the arrogant attitude she had with him initially at the examination hall. "Lightsenville." Lu Longji looked down at her feet and came to a realization that the liquid under her feet was actually pee and not sweat. She'd accidentally pissed herself from fear. I apologize for showing such a disgraceful sight before Senior," Lu Longji said in a trembling voice, showing more concern for his presence than her own dignity. Seeing that she was really about to cry, Su Yang decided that it was time to stop teasing her, and he said while pointing to Li Chong's dead body, "My compensation to your sect for killing your patriarch is that I am willing to become its patriarch until you find another replacement for that trash over there. What?" Lu Longji looked at him with dazed eyes, looking as though she was in disbelief. She was so dumbfounded by Su Yang's words that she was still doubting her own hearing after many moments. "You heard me." Su Yang paused to walk over to the wardrobe, where he retrieved a clean set of the patriarch's robe, even wearing it over his outer court disciple robes, and continued, "I happen to have a lot of time on my hands, so I do not mind wearing this clothing until you find a proper replacement." Lu Longji wanted to express her concerns, but Su Yang was already a step ahead of her. "What is there to be concerned about? I will only be the patriarch in name, so not only will I not change anything within sect, but I will even protect this place for as long as I am here." Despite his words, Lu Longji was still feeling doubtful towards his actual intent. Why would he offer to become this sect's patriarch when there is nothing he could benefit from being the patriarch? Why was he wearing clothes meant for her outer court disciples? Did he also forget that he was the reason why the sect no longer has a patriarch? How about this?" Su Yang continued to speak. "I understand that you are wary of my intentions, as anyone would feel the same way. However, you seem to have forgotten that I have the ability to crush this small place without the need to waste my time by role-playing as the patriarch. I really have no malicious ambitions towards this place, only being bored and wanting to find something to do to pass my seemingly eternal time. Although I did kill your patriarch, that was truly just an unfortunate incident that he'd brought upon himself." After a moment of silence, "What do you say, little girl? I may even bless this sect with a few cultivation techniques that I'd obtained during my humble life." Lu Longji remained silent, yet her eyes seemed to have changed drastically after his explanation. There was still doubt in her heart, as everything he said sounded too good to be true, but he also gave her little reason to refuse his offer. As a matter of fact, the advantages that could be gained from his offer far outweighs its disadvantages. Lu Lanji continued to stand there with a pondering expression after many moments of silence. Although she didn't want to accept someone who wasn't even a disciple of the sect to become the patriarch, she really had no other choice, as his prowess was seemingly too profound for a small sect such as the Profound Blossom sect. Additionally, if what he said was true, that he was willing to protect the sect and even bestow them a few cultivation techniques, then the sect's status within the cultivation world may even soar to the skies, allowing them to hover beside the truly big names in this world. Current position the Profound Blossom sect held within the cultivation world wasn't anything worthy, even looking like ants in the eyes of the giants such as the Divine Sword sect, but with this mysterious old monster's appearance, perhaps they may become something bigger than just ants. Lu Lanji suddenly closed her eyes, sighing in a defeated tone. She then began to lower her body until she was kneeling on the floor. Lu Lanji greets the patriarch, she said loudly. Seeing this, Su Yang nodded with a smile. Very well, then I shall remain in these clothes for a bit longer. And as agreed, I will not touch the sect, nor will I change anything, so you can continue every day as usual. Unless the sect is in peril, I will not intervene with your business, he continued. What about him? Lu Lanji pointed at the lifeless Li Chang and asked. I will leave his body and the announcement of a new patriarch to you. Even if you have to lie to everyone within the sect, I do not want too much of a commotion, as I hate loud noises, he replied, essentially leaving all responsibilities of Li Chang's death to her. Feeling bitter, Lu Lanji nodded. I understand. Good. Then I shall leave for the time being. If you need something from me, you can contact me using this jade slip. Su Yang threw at her a jade slip meant purely for communication before turning to approach the window again, and Lu Lanji watched him leave without saying a word despite her many questions for him. At this moment, all she wanted was for him to quickly leave so she could finally organize her chaotic mind. Not to mention that she has to think of an excuse for Li Chang's death and the sudden emergence of a new patriarch without causing too much commotion within the sect. Ah, why is this happening? Lu Lanji mumbled in a dazed voice. Su Yang returned to his living quarters after leaving the Yin Yang Pavilion, where Chua patiently waited for his return. You're still awake? Although cultivators at your level doesn't require much sleep, you look tired. Get some sleep, or else it'll affect your beautiful skin, said Su Yang to Chua the moment he returned, pretending that he wasn't aware of her sneaky surveillance. Chua silently nodded. She then uncrossed her legs from her lotus position and laid on his bed, treating it as though it was her own bed. Su Yang could only smile at her actions and decided to leave her alone. However, just as he turned around, a low and sweet voice resounded. Light's novel. Tell me a story like you used to, mumbled Chua, her gaze staring at his back with a lonesome feeling. Halting his step, Su Yang spoke with a smile on his face. Which story would you prefer tonight, my spoiled little princess? It was a phrase he'd regularly use whenever she'd ask him for a bedtime story. The story of the mortal girl who traversed the universe in search for her missing father. It became a favorite of mine ever since I first heard it, she replied. I know, said Su Yang. Out of the hundreds of stories I've told you, it's the only story you've ever wanted me to repeat. Su Yang then sat on the bed beside her, and he began narrating the story in a tender voice, as Chua slowly closed her eyes to listen. There was a young girl named... She loved her caring father, who'd worked until he'd fall from exhaustion to feed her, very dearly. But one day, he suddenly disappeared like a ghost. Devastated by her father's disappearance, she went on a journey in search for him. On her journey, she had slain countless demons and beasts, even becoming a famous name throughout the world. Lights Vlamikronem. But alas, despite her worldwide fame and profound power, she was still unable to find her father even after many years. However, she did not give up and continued to search. One day, she broke the boundaries of a human being and soared higher than any cultivator in the world. Eventually, she reached a point where she was able to traverse the stars and travel the starry sky. Countless years have passed since she started her journey in search for her father, but the chances of her father, who was a mere mortal when he disappeared, still being alive at this point was non-existent. However, despite already aware of such facts many years ago, the stubborn daughter continued to look forward to the day her father appears before her again every day. Ultimately, she became one of the strongest existents in the universe with the power to influence even fate. She then traveled to a mythical place where mindless souls awaited for reincarnation, with some souls there having existed for thousands of years. Chua was long asleep by the time Su Yang reached this point, her sleeping face as beautiful as a sleeping fairy and as peaceful as a baby who was deeply asleep. Su Yang stopped telling the story and reached for her face that was stained with tears with his hands, wiping the trail of tears from her silky face. He stood from the bed and left the room shortly after, closing the door behind him. Su Yang released a deep sigh once he was alone, his gaze seemingly filled with countless profound thoughts as he recalled the story of the young girl trying to find her father. And for the remainder of the gloomy night, Su Yang sat in the living room in silence, seemingly in deep thoughts. When morning arrived, Su Yang silently left the house and headed for the distribution center, where the disciples of the sect go to receive their monthly allowances and rewards. The distribution center, a beautiful lady sat inside a pavilion while distributing spirit stones and other things to the disciples that were waiting in line one by one. Su Yang went to the back of the line, standing behind dozens of outer court disciples that had arrived before him. "Hey, look at him, that's Su Yang, right?" One of the disciples in line recognized him and mumbled to the surrounding disciples in a concerned tone. The result of the death match between him and Daijing still resounded in the head of many outer court disciples, so there were still many who felt fear towards him. Su Yang. When one of the surrounding disciples heard his name, she turned her head to look at him with excitement in her eyes, the complete contrary to the other disciples there that were looking at him with fearful eyes. Once she confirmed that he was indeed Su Yang, this young disciple willingly left the line to approach him. "Su Yang, do you still remember me?" This disciple was a young beauty with a prideful demeanor, and she stood beside Su Yang with her arms crossed. Su Yang looked at this young beauty and he smiled. "Naturally, I remember you. How could I forget my first customer within this sect?" This young beauty was indeed Zhou Xian, who had the privilege of being the first within the entire sect to experience Su Yang's techniques. "I never had the chance to thank you properly for fixing my back, so I would like to take this chance to thank you." Zhou Xian gracefully lifted her robes and bowed to him in an elegant motion. "Thank you, Su Yang," she said with a face full of smiles. When the other disciples saw the way Zhou Xian acted so respectfully towards Su Yang, their jaws dropped. As fellow disciples, they knew her very well, especially her arrogant and prideful character that wouldn't waver even when facing fearsome beings like Su Yang, so when she acts the total opposite of her character, they would naturally be dumbfounded. "There is no need to thank me. I only did my job, something you'd had already paid for back then," said Su Yang while shaking his head. Zhou Xian stared at him intensively for a moment, her face looking as though she wanted to say something. A moment later, she spoke with her face slightly red. "About that, it is almost a month since then, and I'm wondering if you are still providing such services." Because the news of Su Yang closing down his service had long reached her ears, Zhou Xian wanted to make sure that the rumors were indeed true. "I am willing to pay 100 premium points, even 200, she continued to speak, her voice sounding a bit desperate. Ever since Zhou Xian experienced his godlike techniques, she had been longing to return to his room every day, a place she considered to be a real paradise. Lights novel. Seeing the yearning in her passionate eyes, Su Yang smiled. "While I have no need for premium points anymore, there is no harm in taking a few breaks throughout the day to stretch myself." He then moved closer to her ears and whispered, "However, I will be doing more than just massage you." Zhou Xian's whole body trembled at his enchanting voice, and she stood there with a dazed expression, her heart beating like war drums. More than just a massage? Zhou Xian believed that he was just poking fun at her, yet she couldn't help but feel elevated anticipation towards such a day. Zhou Xian's beautiful face was flushed with redness at this moment, baffling the disciples there even further. What did he say to her? Her entire face is flushed red. The disciples there wondered, Oh, okay. Zhou Xian nodded and turned around the next instant to walk back to where her friends stood, her movements clearly stiff like a puppet. She was feeling so bashful from his words that she could no longer stand beside him without feeling butterflies in her stomach, hence her quick retreat. Su Yang only smiled at her reaction and didn't say anything else. He then glanced at the beautiful lady inside the pavilion. Lightenville. The beautiful lady at the pavilion did not once stop distributing things to the disciples in line, but Su Yang had clearly sensed her gaze on him ever since he'd arrived. The line advanced quickly, and within minutes it shortened by 24 of disciples. It was relatively peaceful at the line, but when it was almost Zhou Xian and her friends' turn to retrieve their things, the disciples there began making a commotion, causing everybody there to turn their heads. From a distance, 2 disciples in blue robes were quickly approaching the area, one extremely graceful young lady and one exceedingly handsome young man, and they both wore an overbearing expression on their faces as they approached the line. And without the need for the 2 blue-robed disciples to open their mouths, everybody within the line began taking steps backward, forcing the entire line to make space in the front of the line. Su Yang frowned at the situation and the outer court disciples' reaction to the couple's appearance. Core disciples, and 2 of them at that. It's senior apprentice brother Yun and senior apprentice sister Fong, and they are even together. 'Cause core disciples are rarely seen outside of their cultivating areas deep in the center of the Profound Blossom sect, the outer court disciples went into a frenzied state upon seeing the 2, treating them as though they were celebrities. So this is the Profound Blossom sect's core disciples. Su Yang quickly noticed their peak true spirit realm cultivation base that was stronger than almost every sect elders he'd seen thus far, and he recalled when Lan Liqing called the core disciples prodigies chosen by heaven. Where have I seen her face before? Su Yang pondered as he stared at the female core disciple's face. When Su Yang saw the female core disciple, he almost immediately recognized her from the Burning Lotus auction house. She was that wasteful rich girl who'd bought all of his monster cores. When he first saw her during the auction, she was not only wearing outer disciple robes but her appearance was also disguised. However, Su Yang easily saw through her disguise the instant he saw her at the auction house. Hence why he still recognized her now even though she looked entirely different back then. Cultivators disguising themselves to avoid attention could be seen everywhere, so Su Yang didn't find her actions odd. Though, he was slightly interested in why a peak true spirit realm like her would require so many elementary grade and profound grade monster cores, as they wouldn't benefit someone at her cultivation base even if she consumed 100 of them. Perhaps this core disciple wanted to increase the quality of her Yin Qi by cultivating many Yin element monster cores from the lightning cats, but even that seemed unlikely since there are much better and cheaper options. So unless this core disciple was an idiot, there wasn't any need for her to spend so much resource on mere lightning cat monster cores. Senior apprentice sister Fong, she is one of only 8 core disciples that exists in the sect. Not only does she possess superior beauty, but she also has incredible talent, reaching the true spirit realm at the young age of 16 and the peak of true spirit realm only 10 years later. Truly a genius among genius. Senior apprentice brother Yun is slightly behind her in terms of talent, reaching the peak true spirit realm at age 27, but he possesses extremely vigorous yang, meaning his yang qi is twice as effective as normal, hence why there are always female disciples waiting in line to enter his chambers. Su Yang silently listened to the surrounding disciples express their awe for the 2 core disciples, feeling slightly baffled that there are currently only 8 core disciples out of thousands of disciples in the sect. Are the requirements for core disciples really that strict, or are the disciples in this sect just this mediocre? When the 2 core disciples arrived at the front desk, the young sect elder behind the counter stood up to greet them. How can the distribution center be of help to the core disciples today? I am only here to accompany junior apprentice sister Fong today, said the handsome young man with a bright smile, his gaze at Fong Zhilan. Fong Zhilan walked forward and said, I ran out of spirit stones. The moment the sect elder behind the counter heard Fong Zhilan's words, her expression froze. Disciple Fong, what happened to the few hundred spirit stones we gave you just last week? Asked the sect elder, who already knew the answer. It's all spent, she replied calmly. The sect elder sighed loudly. Disciple Fong, although core disciples are privileged to almost all resources within the sect, there is a limit to how much you can waste. You have already retrieved over 1,000 spirit stones just this month alone. At this rate, we will go bankrupt. When the disciples heard the sect elder's words, they all expressed bitterness. Almost everybody within the sect was aware of Fong Zhilan's exaggerated spending habits, which they consider as her only flaw, so they weren't shocked at the situation at hand. What did you even buy that required you spent such a large amount of spirit stones in such a short time? Asked the sect elder. Monster cores, Fong Zhilan instantly replied, her voice still nonchalant. Why did I even ask? The sect elder sighed again. Well? How much did that gluttonous beast grow from those monster cores? She reached the true spirit realm. The sect elder went silent for a moment. How many spirit stones? She spoke in a defeated voice. 100 lights novel. The sect elder then retrieved a small leather bag and handed it to Fong Zhilan. If it wasn't for that thing you are grooming, the sect masters would have long restricted your spending limit. Fong Zhilan accepted the bag of spirit stone and turned to leave with the handsome young man. The disparity between us outer court disciples and core disciples are truly too vast. The disciples there sighed in envy at how easily Fong Zhilan was able to obtain spirit stones. What would take them years of effort to obtain 100 spirit stones? All Fong Zhilan had to do was show up and say a few words. What are you all waiting for? Hurry up and get the line moving again. The sect elder yelled when the line remained unmoving after the core disciples left. The disciples finally snapped out of their mind and began moving again. Lights fell. I will see you soon, Su Yang. After Zhou Xian retrieved her things from the distribution center, she returned to Su Yang to say a few words before leaving. A few minutes later, when it was finally Su Yang's turn at the counter, he approached the sect elder. You are Su Yang? Asked the sect elder the moment he'd arrived at the front. Yes, he said as he handed her his identification badge. The sect elder nodded after confirming his background, and she handed him 3 pairs of green robes, and a small pouch containing 5 spirit stones and a jade slip that did not belong to the list of things he came here to retrieve. When you feel ready, you may head to the inner court to find a new living quarter. Understand. When Su Yang turned to leave, the disciples there stared at him with wide eyes and dropped jaws. Hey! A look at the green robes in his hands. Is that Su Yang? Since when did he become an inner court disciple? What? How is that possible? If I recall correctly, he was only at the 3rd level of the elementary spirit realm just 1 month ago. People there that knew Su Yang and his position within the sect felt the strength in their legs leave at a rapid pace. How did he manage to become an inner court disciple out of the blue? Surely, he did not reach the profound spirit realm in such a short amount of time. Hell, he was still a crippled trash the last time many saw him, yet a month later and he'd become an inner court disciple? Impossible. A commotion immediately occurred at the place. The majority of the outer court disciples there have heard of the name Su Yang at least once since his death match against someone who was 2 cultivation levels above him. However, he was only at the 3rd level of the elementary spirit realm during that time, and in order to become an inner court disciple, one must reach at least the profound spirit realm. Did Su Yang really break through 7 levels and achieve the profound spirit realm in such a short time? How did he do it? Su Yang ignored the many puzzled gazes that were staring at him and calmly left the place. They knew that he was actually already at the true spirit realm, then who knows what kind of reaction they might show. Shortly after learning of Su Yang's new status as an inner court disciple within the sect, the disciples there began spreading the news like wildfire throughout the outer court. And sure enough, everybody was baffled by the unexpected news, especially those that were more familiar with him. As for those that used to bully and treat him like trash, they all locked themselves in their homes, fearful of the day when Su Yang would return for revenge. The news of Su Yang becoming an inner court disciple greatly shocked many outer court disciples. Nobody could imagine how he'd managed to reach the profound spirit realm in less than a month from the 3rd level of the elementary spirit realm, but there were plenty of speculations going around. Some speculated that Su Yang had a fortunate encounter during his sect mission that allowed his cultivation to soar, and others guessed that he had consumed some sort of heavenly treasure. Either way, the fact that Su Yang, who used to be a cripple and a piece of useless trash, had managed to become an inner court disciple while the rest of them are still mere outer court disciples aroused a profound sense of envy in many disciples. Inside Su Yang's room, Chua slowly opened her moon-like eyes and sat up in a sluggish motion. She then looked around with a dazed expression, feeling a bit lightheaded from the deep sleep. Prior to meeting Su Yang, she was always on high alert for the sacred moon palace, hence why she could never sleep peacefully. However, now that Su Yang was in her presence, all of her worries seemingly vanished like smoke and allowed her to sleep like a baby. Father? Being unable to see Su Yang's figure when she woke up, a sense of terror appeared in her heart, feeling fearful that her meeting with Su Yang was only just a dream. Father? Confused, Chua jumped out of the bed, and her cultivation base unintentionally erupted out of her body, instantly covering the entire Profound Blossom sect with a terrifying pressure that caused everybody within the sect to tremble violently, feeling as though there was a dreadful beast in the vicinity. The sudden pressure shocked the living hell out of many people and made them believe that they were under attack, and many disciples even directly fell on the ground after their legs abandoned them. Dozens of sect elders could also be seen running out of buildings with alarmed expressions and weapons in their hands, looking as though they were ready for battle. Chua was at the Divine Lord realm, 2 whole realms above the strongest cultivators in this small and growing world, so even a small portion of her cultivation base would be enough to scare Earth Spirit Realm cultivators to tears, let alone these poor disciples below the true Spirit Realm. Why are you trying to scare people to death so early in the morning? Suddenly, Su Yang's voice loudly resounded from the living room, snapping Chua out of her panicked state. With a dumbfounded expression, Chua used her spiritual sense to look at the living room where the voice resounded from. When she noticed Su Yang looking towards her direction through her spiritual sense, her entire face flushed red from embarrassment. The door to the room opened and Su Yang appeared before her. Suddenly terrorizing the entire sect with your cultivation base, do you care to explain yourself? Even I was startled by your little stunt, Su Yang said to her, looking a bit baffled by the situation. I had a nightmare, she replied in a stiff voice. A nightmare? Su Yang looked at her with wide eyes. Unbelievable. If I wasn't in time wake you up, everybody in this sect would have suffocated to death from the pressure today. Chua was beyond speechless, feeling even more dumbfounded than everybody in the sect currently. To think she'd caused such a commotion by accident, even she was in disbelief at the situation. After a moment of awkward silence, Su Yang sighed and said, "Forget it. Just remember that we are surrounded by mortals, so we need to be more mindful of our actions, especially you, Chua." Hearing his words, she nodded. "I understand. It will not happen again," Light's novel. The moment Chua apologized, Su Yang reached into his storage ring and retrieved a jade slip that was glowing brightly. "Senior, what is this pressure?" Lu Lanji's terrified voice resounded from the jade slip, clearly worried about pressure caused by Chua. Ahem. Su Yang cleared his throat and began speaking in a disguised voice. "I have already dealt with the problem. There is no need for you to worry about it anymore." "What? It has already been dealt with?" "If you do not believe me, you can go look around yourself." I believe, she quickly replied. "If there is nothing else, I will return to my business." Lights Vlamikronem. Su Yang deactivated the jade slip and turned to look at Chua with a weird expression. Chua also turned her head, purposefully avoiding his gaze. "Anyway, I have somewhere I need to attend to," Su Yang suddenly said. "Where are you going?" Su Yang retrieved another jade slip, the one he received at the distribution center today, from his storage ring and handed it to her. "Take a look yourself," he said. Chua then used her spiritual sense to read the content of the jade slip. After reading the contents, she looked at Su Yang with a weird expression. "Why did they pick you?" she asked with a frown. It'd be weird if I wasn't picked after what happened at the examination hall. He chuckled. What happened at the examination hall? Because she didn't follow him with her spiritual sense during his assessment at the examination hall, she was unaware of exactly what happened there. Are you really going? She then asked. It seems fun, so why not? Which part of this seems fun to you? She said in a disappointed voice, clearly unhappy about the contents of the jade slip and his decision to attend such farce. Su Yang remained silent, showing her only a smile on his face. You really are a scoundrel, father. She sighed. Hearing her remarks, Su Yang began laughing out loud. Anyway, I have to talk to someone before I leave for this event. Make sure you do not repeat what happened today when I am gone, he said to her as he left the room. Once Su Yang left, Chua looked at the jade slip in her hand again. I really hate this place. I should have destroyed this place when I had the chance just now. She released a deep sigh before crushing the jade slip with her hands until it shattered into countless fragments. Nearly every disciple within the outer court stopped whatever they were doing and stared at the handsome young man in a set of green robes casually strolling towards the medicine hall. Fuck. The rumors are true. Su Yang really became an inner court disciple. He is actually at the profound spirit realm. The disciples expressed disbelief and shock upon seeing Su Yang in his new sect clothes. Although the news of Su Yang becoming an inner court disciple was already widespread, there were plenty of people who did not believe the news. However, now that they witnessed for themselves Su Yang in his inner court disciple robes, they could only bite their lips and recognize his new standing within the sect. No wait. Damn it. How did that cripple reach the profound spirit realm before me? This must be the heavens playing a sick joke on us. The disciples complained inwardly, thinking that it was a big mistake to promote Su Yang, but none of them spoke out loud, as they were all afraid of his new profound status as an inner court disciple. Meanwhile, Su Yang didn't even bother paying attention to the gazes being directed at him, only focusing on the road. A few minutes later he arrived at the medicine hall, and the moment he entered the doors, many shocked cries resounded inside the place. Junior apprentice brother Su? Why your robes? They are green. The news of Su Yang becoming an inner court disciple did not appear here in the medicine hall yet, hence the shocked reaction from the disciples there. Course they'd be green. I have passed the examination and became an inner court disciple, he said with a smile. Wow. Congratulations, junior apprentice brother Su. What junior apprentice brother? He's our senior now, even if he is younger than us. The girls at the medicine hall all crowded around Su Yang, each giving him their congrats without thinking too much as to how he'd managed such a feat. Meanwhile, disciple Xiao, who was the only one out of the group of sisters to have disliked Su Yang since day one, stared at him with a dumbstruck expression, seemingly in a daze. Although she still found him unpleasant, there was a sense of regret in her heart, regretting that she didn't try to get closer to him when she had the chance. Is Elder Lan here? I'd like to speak to her, Su Yang asked them a moment later. Master? She went to some sort of meeting this morning along with many other sect elders and have yet to return. Meeting? It seemed urgent, so Master left without leaving any words behind. Is it because of that? Su Yang wondered if this meeting had anything to do with Li Chang's death, as such a possibility seemed very likely. Very well, then I will return later. It's not anything important, so it can wait, he said to them before leaving. After leaving the medicine hall, Su Yang walked towards the inner court of the sect, where all the inner court disciples dwelled. This was his first time entering the inner court, and his first impression of the place was more or less disappointment. Compared to the lively and always active outer court with disciples commonly seen chatting and relaxing outside their houses, this inner court was more of an abandoned area with not even a single disciple outside. Light's novel. After standing there for a short moment to look at the place, Su Yang resumed his steps, walking straight to a large area within the inner court, where a few disciples could be seen gathered in the center. There were at least 20 disciples standing around, and all of them wore green robes, meaning that they were all inner court disciples like him. When Su Yang noticed the disciples there, they also noticed him, and they all looked at him simultaneously. Who's that? This is my first time seeing his face here. I have never seen his face before, too. A new inner court disciple? Eh? How is it possible that none of us have heard of him when he's obviously talented enough to become one of us? The inner court disciples all looked at him with their interests piqued. Normally, before any outer court disciple becomes an inner court disciple, their name would have already been known by the inner court disciples, as only those who are talented enough could possibly become one of them, and such talented individuals would naturally enter their ears before he or she becomes one of them. Lights fell. Su Yang, however, became an inner court disciple out of the blue, and he was known for being a useless cripple within the outer court, so it wasn't weird that these inner court disciples, people that only care about the talented, didn't know of him. He's Su Yang. However, not everybody there didn't know Su Yang's face, since there was clearly someone there that was aware of his identity. Huh? You know him? The inner court disciples there turned to look at the young lady who exclaimed very loudly in a surprised voice just now. Eh? The young lady just realized that she'd said his name out loud by accident, and her face reddened. A troubled expression appeared on this young lady's face. She clearly didn't want to associate herself with Su Yang, especially not when all her friends were there. When Su Yang first saw her familiar-looking face, he instantly recognized her identity, and a grin appeared on his face. He began approaching the group at a slow and steady pace, seemingly unfazed by their fearsome presence as a group. Once he reached in front of the group of inner court disciples, or more precisely, the young lady that had called out his name, he bowed sincerely and said in a respectful voice, "It's been a while, master." Ha! The inner court disciples looked at Su Yang and the young lady, and after a moment of thinking, they finally realized the situation. "So he's your servant all along, senior apprentice Sister Li?" Ha! Even though I have seen this plenty of times, it still never fails to entertain me. Your habit of turning others into your own slaves. The surrounding disciples began laughing out loud. The young lady, who was precisely Li Xiaomo, began sweating profusely at their words, and all of the memories of her trying to subdue Su Yang only to be conquered by him quickly returned to her head. "What's wrong, master? Have you already forgotten about me?" Su Yang took the initiative to speak to Li Xiaomo when she was seemingly speechless. What are you doing here, Su Yang? And your clothes. You are an inner court disciple now." The tone Li Xiaomo used when speaking to Su Yang was not anything like a master speaking to her servant, and instead sounded more reserved, almost as if she was talking to someone above her but didn't want to make it sound so obvious. "It's all because of you, master. If it wasn't for your help, I would have never made it here." Su Yang continued treating her as though she was his master, even throwing in a few lies to make things difficult for her. "Senior apprentice Sister Li, why don't you introduce this manservant of yours to us already?" someone suddenly said out loud, and the surrounding disciples nodded. Li Xiaomo looked at the surrounding disciples with a perplexed expression on her face, silently cursing each and every single one of them inwardly. After another moment of silence, Li Xiaomo showed a graceful smile and said, "Junior apprentice brother Su, why must you tease me like this? You made everyone here believe you to be my servant, which is far from the truth." Ha! The smiles on the surrounding disciples froze, and they glared at Su Yang with sharp eyes after realizing that he had played all of them. "How boring. You really are no fun, Li Xiaomo." Su Yang shook his head, feeling disappointed that she didn't play along with him. "Li Xiaomo?" A few disciples there frowned at the way Su Yang casually addressed her, even calling her by her full name. It gave the two a feeling of intimacy, and that secretly displeased a few people there that felt a certain way towards Li Xiaomo, who was relatively popular within the inner court disciples. "Who the hell are you, new kid? Do you not know senior apprentice Sister Li's background here within the inner court?" A handsome young man with long hair and sharp eyebrows spoke out loud as he looked at Su Yang with an unfriendly gaze. "Junior apprentice brother Gu." Li Xiaomo narrowed her eyes at the individual who just spoke, which only made him feel even more irritated. Senior apprentice Sister Li protected the newcomer? When the disciples saw this, their interest in Su Yang skyrocketed. Li Xiaomo was known for her arrogant and overbearing demeanor, so for her to go out of her way to defend someone, that individual must have some sort of special background that even she has to respect. Anyway, Li Xiaomo cleared her throat and turned her attention back to Su Yang. "What are you doing here?" Su Yang looked around at the surrounding disciples and said, "This is the gathering place for that, right? Why else would I be here?" "What? You are also participating in this event?" Not only was Li Xiaomo shocked at the reveal, but even the other disciples were also dumbfounded. "That's impossible. You are clearly a new inner court disciple. There is no way that you could have been chosen for this," exclaimed the disciple surnamed Gu. "Are you kidding me? How could someone who just become an inner court disciple participate this event that upholds the sect's reputation? Based on what qualifications?" Junior apprentice brother Su. "Only those with a substantial amount of experience as an inner court disciple may participate in this event, yet you being here does not make sense." Li Xiaomo partially explained to him why everybody there was surprised. "Is it really that surprising for me to be here?" Su Yang nonchalantly shrugged. "As for my qualifications, Light's novel." He looked at Li Xiaomo and continued, "Li Xiaomo here should know whether or not I am qualified to participate in this event based on her own experiences." Li Xiaomo instantly blushed once she realized the meaning behind his words, and even her body began reacting by feeling heated. "What?" As for the other disciples, their eyes widened with shock. Some of them even felt as though their heart was being hammered by an invisible hammer. Senior apprentice Sister Li. "Surely he must be farting. There's no way that you would have done that with him," the one surnamed Gu said in disbelief. "That's right." The other disciples also decided to join. "For all you already have." "Shut up. Of course, he's just joking with you all." Li Xiaomo suddenly shouted. Place immediately became silent. And just as someone was able to curse at Su Yang for his untasteful jokes, the sound of someone clearing their throat resounded. "It's the matriarch." The disciples there quickly began bowing to the approaching Lu Longji one by one. "This disciple greets the matriarch." Lu Longji nodded. Lights fell. However, when she noticed Su Yang, who was just standing there with a nonchalant expression on his face, Lu Longji pointed at him and said, "I see that nothing about you have changed since we last met, still as disrespectful to your elders as always." Su Yang did not say anything regarding her remarks and continued to stand there silently. Lu Longji frowned upon seeing no reaction from him. Did he not hear what the others there just called her? Or was his body along with his face frozen from shock after learning of her real status? Because Lu Longji did not expose her identity to Su Yang as the matriarch at the examination hall, she believed that Su Yang only saw her as a mere sect elder with zero clues as to her true identity as the matriarch. "How's that, Su Yang? Are you so shocked that you cannot even react properly?" Lu Longji laughed inwardly. After the passionate session inside the examination hall, Lu Longji has always been looking for a way to pay him back for what he'd done to her. And what better way to get her revenge than to show up suddenly as the matriarch of the sect? But alas, too bad for Lu Longji that Su Yang had long guessed her real identity the instant he saw her. Hell, if she knew that Su Yang was actually the current patriarch, who knows how she'll react? "Look at you, shocked speechless over something so small," Lu Longji suddenly said with a grin on her face, poking fun at him. "Are you regretting your actions at the examination hall now?" When Su Yang heard Lu Longji's words, he nearly burst out laughing from how ridiculously wrong she was in her guesses. "After what happened at the examination hall, you still have the courage to speak with such arrogance. Do you have no face?" Su Yang shook his head, his words shocking the disciples there. For him to use such a disrespectful tone towards the matriarch of the sect, does this guy have balls made of steel or something like that? The audacity! The one surnamed Gu exclaimed loudly. Who do you think you are speaking to? Not only did you refuse to greet the matriarch, but you also dared to show such disrespect towards her? Are you even a disciple of this sect? Su Yang looked at the handsome young man surnamed Gu, and he lowered his head to look at the green robes on his body. Are you stupid? Can't you see my clothes? If I am not a disciple here, then what am I? He said in a voice of ridicule, causing the young man to flush in anger. I swear to the heavens that if I do not... Enough! Lu Longji interrupted the two and said, We are already late to the event because I had a meeting to attend. There is no time for your little games right now. If you wish to argue, then do it afterward. Che. You lucked out for now, but just wait until after all of this is over. The disciple surnamed Gu gnashed his teeth at Su Yang before turning away to ignore him. Hearing his threat, Su Yang didn't even lift an eyebrow, as such empty threat was just that insignificant to him. A moment later, Lu Longji continued. Anyway, let me brief you all on the situation before we head to the Chamber of Embrace. First and foremost, all of you here were handpicked by either another sect elder or myself, so I am very confident that you will not disappoint the sect, as a great deal of our sect's resource and reputation depend on this event. The next thing is that the female-to-male ratio here is clearly uneven, with 2/3 of the participants here being female. But as you all know, the overall majority of the guests that will be coming here today are males, so the guests will have no trouble in finding a partner for the day. As for the males, you all should already know what will happen, right? Yes, matriarch. The male disciples there looked at each other with intense gazes, looking as though everyone there had turned in rivals. Because there will only be a few females attending this event, these male disciples will have to use their own abilities to outshine the next if he wants to attract attention. As for the event itself, matriarch, Su Yang suddenly raised his hand. Light's novel. What is it? Lu Longji looked at him and asked. Although I have an idea of what this event entails, the invitation was not exactly clear in the details. Oh right, this should be the first time you've heard of this event, as the previous one happened a year before you joined. Lu Longji nodded, and she continued. Our Profound Blossom sect would organize this event every 1 to 2 years in order to raise resources and create connections with sects and families near our sect, and these sects and families that we have invited may bring along with them at most 2 prominent disciples or descendants that still has their essence intact to cultivate with disciples from our Profound Blossom sect. Hearing her explanation, the only thing Su Yang could think of was prostitution, as one party was required to pay the other for services that involve sexual activities. You actually dare to prostitute me to others? Su Yang was dumbfounded. The jade slip he received only mentioned about the chosen ones improving the sect's reputation by showing off their techniques and said nothing of prostitution. Lu Longji frowned at his choice of words and she said, This is not prostitution. This is the sect assisting its disciples by giving them yin and yang essences from talented individuals. Not only will our disciples grow, but our sect will also become richer. Additionally, nobody will be forcing you to choose a partner. If you do not like the individual requesting for your time, then you may refuse it. Su Yang was speechless at her logic. No matter how she explained it, this method of exchanging their bodies for resources is fundamentally defined as prostitution. Even if she disguised its true intent by saying it benefits the disciples, they are still being paid to cultivate. This is basically cultivator prostitution. This is ridiculous. I will be damned if I am going to participate in this farce. Su Yang turned around and began walking away. He was someone with great pride and dignity, and the thought of selling his body was unthinkable for someone like him. However, it was not as if nobody has offered him wealth in exchange for his time in bed before. Hell, in his previous life, there were countless times when someone would offer him heavenly treasures and divine herbs for his services. This is also one of many reasons as to why Su Yang didn't go beyond massaging his clients during his earlier days, as he despised anything that resembled prostitution. Su Yang. Lu Longji did not expect such a reaction from him and was shocked when he turned to walk away. Although his presence was not necessary for this event, His godlike techniques would surely cause the sect's reputation to soar, and Lu Lanji was not willing to ruin such a chance for her sect to rise. Wait a moment. Lu Lanji quickly chased after Su Yang, who was already far away from the group. The disciples were dazed at the situation. Why would the matriarch chase after such a rude kid? If he wanted to leave and miss out on the easy harvest, then she should just let him leave. This would mean less competition for the males, too. Where do you think you are going, Su Yang? Lu Lanji blocked Su Yang's path by standing in front of him, and she looked at him with a displeased expression. I will not be taking part in this event. My dignity will not allow it, he said with a nonchalant expression, yet his voice was as cold as ice. If there weren't any payments involved, there wouldn't be a need for me to turn around. Lu Lanji sighed loudly. Why are you being so stubborn? I am telling you that this is not prostitution. Of course, we are being paid by our guests for this event, and that may make it seem as such, but they are the ones offering these payments, and it has always been like that since the founding of the sect. I have no problems with the sect participating in such activities, as that is its nature. However, that has nothing to do with why I refuse to participate, Su Yang said as he walked around Lu Lanji. Lu Lanji could feel her body trembling from anger at this moment. How could he be so disrespectful towards his seniors, much less the matriarch of this sect? She has never seen a disciple as troublesome as him. However, as much as she hated dealing with Su Yang, she also admired his techniques as much if not even more. Hold it. Lu Lanji blocked his path again and began persuading him again. Then how about this? You are not participating this for the sect and instead will be participating for me. Su Yang looked at her as though he was looking at an idiot, and he continued to walk. However, Lu Lanji blocked him off again before he could really go anywhere, and she continued to persuade him. Fine! Then I will return to all the guests their payments. Will you stay now? Seeing her odd behavior, Su Yang remained silent, causing Lu Lanji to feel apprehensive. The only reason she was going this far to satisfy him was because of what happened during the meeting she attended prior to coming here. The meeting consisted of nearly every sect elder within the sect, and it was there that Lu Lanji revealed to everybody Li Chang's death, which greatly shocked everybody there with ease. And although it took some time after everyone there organized their minds and calmed down, they began analyzing the situation of having a new and unknown patriarch. The end of the meeting, long story short, the sect has decided to start the processes of grooming a new patriarch a few years earlier than planned. And naturally, after Lu Lanji experienced Su Yang's godlike techniques, he became one of the highest priorities in her list of talented individuals that are worthy enough to be groomed as a future patriarch. You really want me to participate in this event, huh? Is there a specific reason as to why you are so determined to have me stay? No, forget it. Su Yang decided to remain silent instead, as he could already guess her inner thoughts. Since you are this adamant on having me participate this little event, to the point where you are willing to throw away so much resource, I guess I could spare some time to check it out. Eh? Does this mean... However, I have another request, he suddenly said. Light's novel. You still want more from me? Surely this must be the famous saying, give an inch and they'll take a mile. It's not much, really. I only want to use the Yin Yang Pavilion to cultivate for a few days. What? You want to use the Yin Yang Pavilion? That's impossible. Even if I ignore the fact that only the sect masters are allowed to use the Yin Yang Pavilion, the patriarch would never allow it, said Lu Lanji. Although she personally wouldn't mind lending him the Yin Yang Pavilion, she didn't want Su Yang, who was known for being disrespectful to his elders, to bother the new patriarch, someone with an eccentric nature. Who knows what the patriarch would do if Su Yang offended him? Not to mention that Su Yang was also a candidate for the next patriarch, and it'd be a tragic event if he died because of something like this. However, Lu Lanji then continued, I can give you the privilege to use the Chamber of Embrace for as long as you'd like, all free of charge, of course. You're being awfully generous today, matriarch. Did you wake up on the right side of the bed this morning? Su Yang chuckled. Lu Longji became speechless. She didn't know how to respond to him, so she decided to end their conversation there. Meanwhile, the disciples all wondered what they were talking about for it to take so long. If recalled correctly, weren't they already pretty late to the event? The guests might just forget about today and leave if they are kept waiting for too long. When Lu Longji finally left Su Yang's side and returned to the other disciples, she began leading them to the Chamber of Embrace. The Chamber of Embrace was located in a small valley near the center of the inner court. Once they arrived at the place, the group of disciples was greeted by a small mountain the size of a 9-story tall building with 5 cave entrants spread around the mountain. So this is the Chamber of Embrace? Su Yang narrowed his eyes at the small, unremarkable mountain before him. If one looked at it normally, the mountain looked no different than any other mountain beside its abnormal small size. However, when Su Yang used his all-seeing celestial eyes to look at the place, he was pleasantly surprised by what he'd found within this Chamber of Embrace. The root of vitality, it's bigger than I'd expected, he mumbled to himself. Beside the small mountain and its 5 entrances, there was also a few dozens of people standing around in the large open area beside the Chamber of Embrace. And once Su Yang and the others arrived at the place, they all turned to look at them with sparkling eyes, clearly excited to see so many handsome young men and beautiful young ladies. When the guests noticed the group of disciples approaching them, their hearts throbbed profusely, as they will be embracing someone within that group today. As expected of the Profound Blossom sect, their appearances are truly the best within the Eastern continent. One of the guests praised. I have never seen so many top-notch beauties in one place at once. A young man within the group could already feel blood rushing towards his little brother. As a matter of fact, the majority of the guests there were already feeling arousement just from looking at the group of disciples. I apologize for the late arrival, said Lu Longji upon seeing the guests. And since we are already behind schedule, I will be skipping the basic introductions. The disciples I have brought today are all masterful in the art of pleasure and the most experienced within their ranks. If you see one to your liking, you may go up to the individual and request for their time. However, keep in mind that I cannot force them accept your proposal and that there is a chance for refusal. After saying her piece, Lu Longji stepped back to allow the crowd for a better look at her disciples. As for the disciples themselves, they began moving away from each other in order to distinguish themselves from one another. The only one that didn't move was Su Yang. He just casually stood there, looking as though he was just a spectator. The guests immediately began speaking to one another. Young master, how about that beauty all the way to the right? I believe her to be fitting of your taste. Of course, there were also guardians and sect elders within the guests as representatives just in case something happens. Senior apprentice Sister Mai, what do you think about that young man with the long black hair in the back? He's clearly the most handsome out of them all. The females within the guests immediately noticed Su Yang that stood out like a sore thumb due to his overwhelmingly superior appearance when compared to the rest. I would love to choose him as my partner, but there's something frightening about him. Eh? You think so too? While many within the guests wanted to pick Su Yang, there was something about him that prevented them from approaching him. It was as though there was an invisible barrier around him that warded off others. A few minutes after the event started, the first person stepped forward. He was a young man with a large figure and a slightly above-average face, and unlike most of the males from the Profound Blossom sect, his muscles were bulging with veins. A body refiner? Su Yang instantly recognized the young man's cultivation technique. Because of the rigorous and heavy training body refiners must go though, they are all usually built bigger than common cultivators. As for Su Yang, whose body was too slim and elegant for a body refiner, it was all because of his unique cultivation technique. Light's novel. This young man with large muscles proceeded to approach the female disciple with the smallest physique within the group, dumbfounding many people there. I am a body refiner at the peak stages of the elementary spirit realm. May I request this beauty for her time today? The young man bowed elegantly despite his stiff-looking body. The female disciple looked at him for a moment before nodding her head with a smile. Seeing her approval, the young man's face bloomed with smiles. Lu Longji nodded at the two and said, "The two of you may enter any one of the chambers. You are allowed only one session inside, but there is no time limit for the session. Whether you last a minute, an hour, or an entire day, it is considered one session when the both of you release the chi within your body once. Do you have any questions? What if only one of the two manages to, release? Then it will be continued until both of them releases their respective chi," said Lu Longji. "And although I have already laid out the rules during the invitations, I will repeat it again here. You are not allowed to harm my disciples in any way, shape, or form. As for rough plays, that'll be at my disciples' discretion." The guests nodded at her words, and the first two began making their way to one of the 5 available chambers. After the first pair entered the chamber of embrace, the other guests immediately approached the other profound blossom sect disciples in fear that she may be snatched by another. The second person to step forward was a young man with average appearances, though his average looks was rated by the outside world. If he was graded under the profound blossom sect standards, then he'd be way below average, even ugly. Lights fell. "My name is Meng Li, and I am at the 2nd level of the profound spirit realm." "No thank you." The female disciple the young man was trying to court refused his offer before he could even finish his sentence, causing him to feel not only dumbfounded but embarrassed as well. For him to think that he could court our senior apprentice sisterly with his trash looks, what a fool. Profound blossom sect disciples snorted coldly inside their heart at the young man's attempt. After hearing Li Xiaomo's refusal, the young man walked back with his head lowered in shame. Although Lu Longji did not mention it, there would naturally be a few guests that may not be able to find a cultivating partner today. Meanwhile, Li Xiaomo glanced at Su Yang with the corner of her eyes after refusing the young man. "I may not be able to participate in this event with his presence here." She inwardly sighed to herself. Although it was common for disciples of the Profound Blossom sect to cultivate with more than one individual throughout their life in the sect, there are still individuals that did not like the idea of sharing their partners, with some even going as far as rejecting anyone that has already been taken. Li Xiaomo clearly felt some way towards Su Yang after their first encounter, and afraid that he may be one of those individuals that dislikes the idea of sharing, she decided to sit out on this event despite already showing up. Many minutes have passed since the event started, and all 5 entrances to the Chamber of Embrace were closed at this moment. While everybody there waited, a few disciples from the Profound Blossom sect side decided to introduce themselves in order to attract more attention. They talked about their backgrounds and what they hoped to achieve in the cultivation world, quickly gathering the attention of the guests. "Young lady, what do you think about him?" "He seems like a pretty decent guy," whispered an old man from the crowd, his gaze at a beautiful young lady with short black hair. The young lady coldly snorted at the old man's words. "This is my 3rd time here. If the last 2 didn't work, what makes you think things will be any different this time?" The old man sighed at her words and he replied, Do not blame this old man. I am only here as an escort. If the young lady wishes to make a complaint, please go directly to the head of our family." The young lady's mood seemingly worsened after hearing the old man mention their family. "I cannot comprehend father's thoughts. Why would he send me to this vulgar place to find a husband? This is not only great humiliation to me but also to the entire family." The old man shook his head at her words. Even he, one of the most trustworthy servants within the family, does not know of her father's intention for sending his daughter to a shameful place like this. Telling me to find a husband from this vulgar place is no different than telling me to pick a husband from some expensive brothel. If this is not humiliation, then there is nothing in this world that could be considered as humiliating, and I will no longer stand for this. Once we are finished here, I will give a piece of my mind to my father." The old man only smiled bitterly at the young lady's endless grumbling. No matter how stubborn the young lady is, her father will always be more stubborn. He sighed inwardly, and he began paying attention to the Profound Blossom sect again. His job was to find a suitable partner for the young lady with him today. If he fails again like he'd for the last 2 times, then he would be at risk for a beating by the head of the family, who was also the young lady's father. Every young man at the Profound Blossom sect was more than qualified to be the young lady's partner in terms of look, but one would be required more than just appearances in order to be accepted by her family. After taking a few minutes to analyze all the disciples from the Profound Blossom sect, the old man realized that he couldn't find anything unique about these young men besides their appearances. Though there was one young man within the group that gave off a completely different atmosphere than the others, setting himself apart from them. His appearances are definitely something to be envied of, even by this place's standards, but the old man scratched his head, feeling perplexed. But he has this dangerous feeling around him, and I don't have a clue as to his character or demeanor. Suddenly, the young lady asked him, "Old Lou, can we go home already? At this rate, we will be standing here until this festival meant for perverts ends. You father strictly ordered us to not return until this is all over." Che. The young lady sucked her teeth in disappointment, and then she began looking at the Profound Blossom sect disciples out of boredom. Light's novel. Meanwhile, Su Yang stood there with an irritated expression, feeling as though he was a puppet on display from just standing there and being watched. He turned to look at Lu Longji and spoke. "How long do we have to be here?" 2 days, she calmly replied. Su Yang narrowed his eyes at her before turning to look at the crowd of guests. There were still at least 40 people there, with only around 10 females amongst the entire group. Out of these 10 females, only half of them had decent faces. And among these 5 young ladies, only 3 of them could be considered average by the Profound Blossom sect standards, meaning that they were definitely beautiful ladies in the world outside of this weird place. A few minutes later, just as Su Yang was prepared to move, one of the female guests stepped forward, becoming the first from the 10 there. When the disciples saw this, they instinctively straightened their backs to look even taller. Although the benefits these disciples would receive from today's event was nothing really worthy for inner court disciples like them, they are doing this mainly for bragging rights and to boost their pride and ego. If they truly wished to advance their cultivation base, they wouldn't be here standing around and wasting time and would instead be cultivating with fellow disciples that are clearly more pleasant to cultivate with. Lightsville. In other words, these inner court disciples are only here to show one another that they are the superior one when it comes to their charm, something all the disciples from the Profound Blossom sect took pride in. As for the female disciples, their reason for joining was much more simple. They wanted more resource from the sect. Unlike core disciples that have an almost unlimited resource for cultivation, they still have to earn the majority of their resources. And although it may sound bad to others, the female disciples actually liked how they get to obtain both resource and yang essence from talented individuals at the same time, something extremely rare in a sect such as this place, as virgin males are even more scarce than pure maidens in this place. After standing there for a few moments, looking hesitant, the young lady began approaching the Profound Blossom sect disciples. When she arrived in front of the disciple surnamed Gu, the smile on his face widened. However, before he could even open his mouth halfway, the young lady walked right past him and continued walking straight towards Su Yang, who was standing not far away behind him. "Hello, I am Judah, inner court disciple of the Blue Wind Valley. May I ask for this brother's time whenever there is an open room?" The young lady asked Su Yang with a shy expression on her face. The smile on Disciple Gu's face immediately froze, and his head began burning from embarrassment a moment later. "Su Yang!" he growled inwardly, feeling anger as though his family was just murdered right in front of him. Su Yang silently gazed at the seemingly docile young lady before him. She had long black hair, delicate features, and a decent figure. If she were in the world outside of this place, then she'd definitely be recognized as a beauty. Judah looked more nervous as time went by without any replies. Su Yang closed his eyes and he spoke. "I refuse." "Wah." Judah's expression expressed shock for an instant before she managed to put on a stiff smile. "And may I ask why? Am I not good enough for this brother?" she asked him, trying to stay calm. "Although you may be able to fool others with your little act, I happen to have keen eyes for women, and you are unpleasant to my eyes. Scram before I help you," Su Yang said to her in a calm voice. Not only was Judah dumbfounded by his seemingly harsh and unwarranted words, even Lu Lanji's jaw dropped from shock. Su Yang, what do you think you are? How dare a man-whore like you speak to my daughter like that? Before Lu Lanji could scold Su Yang, another voice loudly resounded from the crowd of guests. It was a middle-aged man. Su Yang glanced at the middle-aged man with a furious expression within the crowd. What did you just call me? Su Yang's gaze narrowed at him, and the frightening aura surrounding him thickened. When the middle-aged man saw Su Yang's beast-like gaze, his legs nearly gave up on him. However, he managed to stay standing, and he even started yelling at an even louder voice. I paid your sect a great amount of resources not to have you insult my daughter. I demand Even if you decide to give me the world as a payment, I still wouldn't touch her. Su Yang laughed out loud. Su Yang. Lu Lanji called for him. She couldn't understand why he was being so rude, even going as far as to make such inappropriate remarks seemingly for no reason. Ha! Suddenly, another laughter besides Su Yang's resounded. It was a feminine laugh. Everybody turned to look at the one who just laughed. It was a beauty young lady with short black hair. This is hilarious. Judah, this is the first time I've witnessed your little act ineffective against someone. Truly a scene to behold. Young lady. The old man beside her looked at her with a surprised expression. What was she trying to achieve by meddling in their conversation? Lu Lifen. Mind your own business. Judah called her name in a chilling voice. The young lady named Lu Lifen laughed even louder at her words. Or what? What are you going to do to me, surnamed Zhu? Judah gnashed her teeth with hatred, her gaze at Lu Lifen filled with killing intent, yet she didn't dare to refute, seemingly afraid of the young lady with short black hair. The Lu family. The middle-aged man also looked at Lu Lifen with an unpleasant gaze, but when the old man beside her turned to look at him with narrowed eyes, his body immediately trembled from a dreadful feeling. Old Lu. The middle-aged man mumbled under his breath, and he turned to his daughter and said, forget about him. He's clearly not worth your time. Judah nodded, but as she turned to leave, Su Yang mumbled to her, So it's a family thing, huh? Su Yang's words caused Judah to halt for a moment, but she managed to ignore him and walk away. However, just as Judah passed Disciple Gu, he spoke to her. To disrespect a fine lady such as yourself, that bastard clearly isn't a man. Judah stopped her steps this time. What may this brother's name be? She asked him in a sweet voice. I am Gu Wei, Profound Blossom Sect Inner Court Disciple. I am Judah. Sister Zhu, correct? How about it, Sister Zhu? Want me to comfort you in place of that idiot behind me? He said, directly going for her hands. Lights fell. Judah remained silent for a moment before nodding. Seeing this, Su Yang grinned. What a great matchup, he laughed inwardly. The two of you may enter once there is an available room, said Lu Lanji upon seeing the two pair up. Through Gu Wei and Judah paired up, the two proceeded to wait in a separate area, where they could connect with each other while waiting for an available room. Meanwhile, Su Yang looked at the young lady with short black hair with a slight smile on his face. He then began moving forward, taking casual steps towards the crowd. Where do you think you are going, Su Yang? Lu Lanji called him out before he could even move 3 steps. To pick a partner, of course, he said calmly, dumbfounding everybody there, especially the Profound Blossom Sect disciples. Who told him that he was allowed to choose? That's ridiculous. Since when? Are you going to tell me no? Su Yang interrupted the disciple that was speaking and spoke directly to Lu Lanji, who was looking at him with a frown. Since when did I turn into some toy on display waiting to be picked and played? He continued. I am Su Yang, I choose who I want to embrace. There was profound feeling within the words he spoke, especially the last sentence, and the proud expression on his face as he spoke managed to charm many people there. Even Lu Lanji looked at him with wide eyes, seemingly a bit dazed by his words. Su Yang continued to walk after his words, and he was seemingly heading towards the young lady named Lu Lifen. When he stood in front of her, Su Yang smiled and said, I can tell that you are also bored of being here, so why don't we go somewhere quiet to drink some tea? The young lady also smiled. Is there such a place here? She asked him. Of course. It's just right over there. Su Yang pointed to the chamber of embrace, giving her a small chuckle. Say, I am curious. How did you know? She then asked. Don't play dumb now. Maybe we can talk about this over some tea? I'm feeling quite thirsty after that conversation just now. Lu Lifan suddenly became quiet. It'll be a boring tea session with no action if you don't mind, she said a moment later. I am only interested in the tea, he quickly replied. Through another moment of silence, Lu Lifan nodded. Good. Let's drink some tea, shall we? Lu Longji watched their interaction with a puzzled expression on her face. Why did Su Yang suddenly become willing to participate when he was so reluctant just moments ago, even going as far as to invite the other individual himself? Even Li Xiaomo looked a bit dazed from his actions. He was willing to embrace someone like her when literally almost everyone within the sect was superior in every way? This caused a bitter feeling in her heart. And just a few moments after Lu Lifan decided to enter Chamber of Embrace with Su Yang, one of the 5 doors opened, and the first 2 that went inside slowly came out walking side by side. The bulky young man looked as though he just came back from paradise, his expression loose and silly-looking, almost as though he was mentally challenged. And the way he walked looked funny, looking as though he would fall after every few steps. The small young lady beside him, on the other hand, looked perfectly normal. Hell, the only thing that was different about her now from before she entered was that her face looked slightly rosier. When the other guests saw this, they all did unconsciously swallowed hard. Although they have heard rumors of this place and its great reputations, their expectations just soared to the heavens. Are their techniques really that great? To the point where someone that small was able to completely tire out a body refiner as though she was taking a stroll in the park? The next pair may go inside. Before Lu Longji could finish her sentence, 2 figures could be seen walking towards the open door. Hey! What do you think you are doing? Gu Wei roared at the 2 figures approaching the Chamber of Embrace. What does it look like I am doing? Su Yang only stopped for an instant before walking again, causing Gu Wei to flush red from anger. Light's novel. You bastard! We were clearly first in line. However, no matter how loud Gu Wei screamed at him, Su Yang did not stop moving and walked straight into the Chamber of Embrace with Lu Lifan following behind him. When the 2 entered the cave-like entrance, a large rock appeared to block the entrance, locking them inside. Seeing this, Gu Wei nearly exploded in madness. He turned to look at Lu Longji and said, Matriarch! This disciple was clearly wronged and requests the matriarch to seek for justice. Lu Longji looked at him with a bitter smile. What could she do to him? Even though she's the all-powerful matriarch, Su Yang was a special entity within the sect, not to mention their complex relationship. I will punish him accordingly afterwards, said Lu Longji just to calm Gu Wei down. Thank you, matriarch. Gu Wei bowed with a bright smile on his face. The inside of the Chamber of Embrace looked just like a small cave but decorated with a luxuriously large bed in the center of the place. Indeed, there was only 1 bed and a few dimly lit light sources inside this chamber with nothing else. Huh? Did those 2 that was here just now really do anything in here? It is too clean in here, almost as if nothing happened here. Surely they didn't clean it with such perfection after doing that, right? Lu Lifan pondered out loud. There is something in here that absorbs every last drop of the surrounding yin qi and yang qi, so you won't find anything remaining in here. Su Yang explained to her without telling her the existence of the root of vitality. Is that so? Lu Lifan sat on the bed and turned to look at Su Yang, who was inspecting the place. So? Why did you choose me out of everyone out there? Is it because I look the best? She asked. No, I only picked you because you looked bored, he said with a small smile. I don't believe you, she quickly replied. If you are thinking about taking my purity, then you can forget about it. I did not come here because I desired such things, but because I was forced to by my family. Understandable, but I really do not intend on touching you, Soo-young assured her again, his gaze still wandering around the place, looking as though he was searching for something. I don't believe you, she said again. Soo-young stopped looking around and turned to look at her with a grin. I will not benefit much from someone at the 4th level of the profound spirit realm even if I take your essence. Lu Lifan's eyes slightly widened at his words. How did he know her cultivation base? Soo-young began looking around the place again, and his weird actions gradually attracted Lu Lifan's curiosity. What are you doing? She asked. Looking for a way to dig something out without uprooting this entire mountain, he casually said. Lu Lifan laughed at his reply, thinking that he was joking with her. Hey, tell me about yourself, she continued. Soo-young, inner court disciple. I don't care about that. I am a scoundrel that enjoys embracing beautiful women. It is also my sole reason for living. Are you suggesting something? She said with a frown. Don't worry, you are not in my category of beautiful women, he calmly said. Hearing his words, Lu Lifan's face reddened, clearly angry at his remarks. Are you picking a fight with me? I will have you know that I... All right, I am ready to leave, Soo-young suddenly said, dumbfounding her. What? Already? We literally just got here. I have achieved what I came here for, so I am ready to leave. Unless you want to stay here a bit longer to exercise? Lu Lifan coldly snorted and said, Let's go! I have misjudged you. I came here believing you to be an interesting individual, but I was wrong. She walked to the exit, but after a good minute of looking for a way to remove the boulder from blocking the exit and failing, she gave up on trying to do it herself and turned to ask Soo-young. How do I move this thing? She asked in an irritated voice. Soo-young shrugged and said, This is my first time here, so even I do not know. What? How could this be? After a moment of pondering, Soo-young retrieved a jade slip from his storage ring and began pouring his profound chi into it. Hey, little girl, how does the Chamber of Embrace work? He decided to ask Lu Lanji as the patriarch. Patriarch. What would the patriarch like to know about it? Although she wondered why he was interested in the place, she didn't dare to ask. How does it function? More specifically, how does it open and close? It opens whenever given spirit stones, and it will remain open until at least 2 individuals enters at the same time. Once it closes, it will open again once everyone inside the chamber releases their passion chi at least once, she quickly explained. So it won't open until the people inside releases their chi? That's right. 3. Soo-young sighed before abruptly cutting the connection. What is it? Did you find a way to open this thing? It won't open unless the both of us release our chi, he said to her. Lu Lifan's expression drastically changed upon hearing his words. So it won't open unless the 2 of them embraced each other? That's ridiculous. I do not believe you. Lu Lifan began attacking the stone boulder with all her strength, throwing every technique she had mastered up to this point at the large rock, but alas, it remained unmoving, like a mountain. Damn it! You tricked me. You knew that this would happen, she said angrily. Huh? What are you talking about? Why would I need to trick you? Like I have already said multiple times, I do not intend on touching you, he shook his head. Additionally, we only have to release our chi in order for it to open. You are overreacting. Che. Lu Lifan sucked her teeth. Then what do you suggest? That we play with ourselves with each other still in the same small room? That's outrageous. Do you have any better ideas? After a moment of silence, Lu Lifan walked to the bed and then she said, Listen here. You will not turn around until I am finished no matter what, or else I will kill you on the spot. Yeah, he lazily replied. Don't test me. I will really do it. After saying those words, Lu Lifan laid on the soft bed and began loosening her robes until she could touch her weak spot. She then turned to look at Soo-young again, who was sitting by the entrance in the lotus position with his eyes closed, seemingly cultivating. Seeing this, she heaved a sigh of relief, and her hands slowly approached her nether region the next moment. Time quickly passed as Su Yang cultivated in silence. However, the background noises behind him would occasionally disturb the peaceful environment. Lu Lifan's slightly heavy breathing could be heard every once in a while, yet it didn't sound anything like pleasure. Instead, it sounded more like she was getting tired, even irritated. "Are you done yet? It's been over an hour since you started, yet we are still here, even though you seemed quite eager to leave before," said Su Yang, his sudden voice startling Lu Lifan, who was so focused on herself that she'd totally forgotten about his existence. "Shut up. I have never done this before, so I cannot help it. What about you? All you have been doing is sitting there. When are you going to relieve yourself too?" "There's no meaning if only I do it," she yelled back. "You really think I'd do something as shameful as playing with myself? Who do you think I am? I can relieve myself without touching myself," Su Yang said in a bragging voice, dumbfounded Lu Lifan. Was that really something to be bragged about? Although self-pleasure was in no way a shameful act with countless people doing it daily, such a statement could not be said the same for Su Yang, who has never touched himself before, as there was no need for him to do such a thing when he could easily have someone else do it for him at the snap of his fingers. Lu Lifan stopped touching herself and retrieved her hands from inside her underwear, and she stared at Su Yang with an odd expression. "You can relieve yourself without touching yourself? Is that even possible?" she asked him with a doubtful gaze, feeling a bit ridiculous herself for asking such an odd question. "If I can't even do something as simple as controlling my own yang qi, can I even call myself a man?" Su Yang said as he shook his head, thinking that it was only natural that he'd be able to do such a thing. "Really? Then why didn't you say so in the beginning? We could have left this place by now if you had told me before I started doing something like that." Su Yang laughed at her words and he said, "You think an ability like that could be learned through one's mouth? Even if I lecture you for 100 years straight, you still wouldn't understand it." It had taken him thousands of years of experience in order to fully master this technique. Yet this little girl who wasn't even 20 years old actually thought that she'd also be able to learn it? How laughable! Lu Lifan frowned at his words, feeling even more helpless now. "Then what else can I do? I have been trying to release my yin qi for the past hour without any results. If anything, it's actually hurting right now," she said as she pointed to her nether region. Su Yang looked at her with a strange expression on his face. Even people half your age would be able to relieve themselves without any help, yet you cannot do something as simple as satisfying yourself? How pure are you, really? Shut up. Unlike you sensual cultivators, I am a normal cultivator who does not need such knowledge in my life. Light's novel. Your future husband will be sad, you know? Fuck. You really are a despicable person, she glared at him angrily. Su Yang shook his head and then he approached her. "We will never leave this place at this rate. How about I help you with your yin qi?" he said to her in a nonchalant voice. "You wanna what? Get away from me, you pervert. I will kill you if you dare to touch me." Lu Lifan backed herself to the wall when she noticed Su Yang walking towards her. "Do I really look like someone who'd force myself upon others? I am just offering my services to you so that you can satisfy yourself. I won't touch you anywhere you do not want," he said in a voice filled with sincerity. Lu Lifan stared at him in silence. After a few moments, she opened her mouth to ask, "What will you be doing to me exactly?" "A back massage to loosen your body, strengthening its sensitivity to anything it touches," he said. "A back massage? That's all? Really? Are you forgetting where this is? We are in the Profound Blossom sect, a reputable place known to many, or else there wouldn't be so many guests such as yourself here today, not to mention the matriarch is right outside. If I, an inner court disciple of such sect, does something as immoral as forcing myself onto a guest, who would want to come here for services anymore? I'm not stupid enough to risk my entire life, even ruining my sect's hard-earned reputation at the same time for a little girl like you." Su Yang shook his head with a dejected expression, looking as though he was offended by her distrust for him. When Lu Lifan saw his expression, she realized that she had been overreacting this entire time. He was right. The disciples of this profound blossom sect could not be trusted, then why are there so many guests here today? I'm sorry for doubting you, even though I am here as a guest. She apologized in a low voice. I guess it's probably because I am still mad at my family for sending me here. The sad expression on Su Yang's face instantly disappeared, and a smile appeared in its place instantly. I will accept that apology if you lay on this bed and allow me to massage your back, he said. Although Lu Lifan was still feeling hesitant, she nodded her head regardless, and she approached the bed in small steps. Once she was on the bed with her back facing to the ceiling, Su Yang slowly moved his hands towards her slim figure. The moment Su Yang's fingers touched her back, a wave of tingling sensations surged within her body like an electric current. This unexpected feeling in her body caused her to let out a surprised moan. Ah, her moan slightly echoed in this small place. When she realized what she had done, her face flushed red. What had happened just now? What did he do to her body? It was at this moment Su Yang slithered his fingers across her back with snake-like movements, spreading the tingling sensation all over her body. Then, Lu Lifan's body trembled, and her hands naturally turned into fists, stiffening the muscle in her body. Relax your body. Su Yang's gentle voice entered her ears as he pressed his fingers into her soft body. Ah, another unintentional moan escaped her mouth. What is this feeling? Lu Lifan was shocked at the reaction of her body. It felt as though even a gentle wind created by Su Yang's moving hands could cause her body to tingle with delight. This feeling of pleasure was something she couldn't experience when she was playing with the most sensitive part of her body, yet she was feeling such a strong sense of contentment at this moment from a mere back massage. If only this could last forever, she thought to herself as her body slowly submerges itself into paradise. An unknown amount of time passed for Lu Lifan since she went into a mythical state of harmony, and suddenly the heavenly feeling that wrapped her body abruptly stopped. She turned to look at Su Yang with a puzzled look, wondering why he'd stopped. I am done. Your body should now be sensitive enough that even someone as unskilled as yourself would be able to please. Lu Lifan stared at Su Yang with a blank look. Go ahead, I will be waiting for you to finish over there, said Su Yang as he pointed at the corner, sounding as though he really had no other intentions in his mind. Wait. Lu Lifan grabbed him by the sleeves before he could take 2 steps. Then with a blushing expression she spoke. Since we are already at this point, why don't you help me with the rest? Su Yang turned to look at her with a pondering expression. I won't understand you if you are being this vague, he said in a genuinely puzzled voice. Although Lu Lifan somehow knew that he was faking his perplexion, she still decided to explain to him in detail her desire. I want you to help me with releasing my yin qi, she said in a timid voice. Are you sure? Even though you were so reluctant with me touching you. Stop playing innocent and help me already. I am saying that you can touch me, she said in an aggravated tone. What should I do? Su Yang continued playing hard to get. If you help me, then I will also help you in return, Lu Lifan said loudly. Hearing her words, Su Yang smiled. Since you are this stubborn, I guess I can help you. Lu Lifan pouted at his words, but since he accepted her request, she decided to let it go. Su Yang sat on the bed and he patted his lap. Come, sit on my lap. Huh? You want me to sit on your lap? Why do I have to do something that embarrassing? You find this embarrassing, yet you want me to help you release your yin qi? Are you sure you want to do this? Lu Lifan frowned, but she didn't have anything to refute him with, so she turned her body and pressed her soft buttocks on his lap, sitting on him like a child sitting on her parents' lap. Lights flamikronem. Then I will begin. Su Yang said a moment later, and she timidly nodded. Su Yang then loosened her robes and slipped his right arm into her dress like a snake slithering into its prey's home. Lu Lifan could feel his warm hand slowly approaching the region in between her legs, causing her body to stiffen. Her breathing pattern quickened, and her entire body shivered from Su Yang's gentle breathing on her neck. A moment later, she could feel something touch her bottom lips, and her legs instinctively closed itself. "Relax," Su Yang whispered from behind her ears, and as though his voice was imbued with magic, her tense body began loosening itself. He then began spreading his legs, guiding Lu Lifan's legs to spread open with his. Seeing herself in such a position, Lu Lifan's head flushed red. "This is so embarrassing," she mumbled to herself. Su Yang then wrapped his left hand around her waist, and his right hand began caressing the closed slit to her cave. "Ah!" Lu Lifan moaned loudly with her head bending backward. If Su Yang wasn't embracing her waist tightly, then her body would have sprung forward like a bridge. "Wow, you are already this wet?" Su Yang said in a teasing voice at the slippery sensation. After caressing the outside of her nether region for a few seconds, Su Yang began spreading apart her closed pussy with his fingers to touch the little pearl in her body. Aha, lights novel. As though a beast was awakened inside her, Lu Lifan howled loudly, and her hands circled behind her, tightly embracing Su Yang's head. Lu Lifan's lower body wiggled around non-stop, yet Su Yang's finger somehow managed to stay on her little pearl with absolute accuracy. What is this feeling?" Lu Lifan loudly exclaimed. "I feel as if my mind is going crazy." The intensive feeling in her bottom lips aroused a profound sensation all over her body, and after only a few moments she could already feel something welling up inside her. Wait. I feel like peeing." Lu Lifan became terrified at the thought of pissing herself when someone was touching her so passionately. "Don't worry, that just means you are almost ready to release your yin qi," said Su Yang as his finger moved increasingly faster. It's coming. It's Lu Lifan suddenly released a sharp moan, and her lower body squirted a large amount of liquid, soaking Su Yang's hands in holy water. Lu Lifan slumped on Su Yang's chest after she finished releasing her yin qi with an exhausted look on her face, yet her body was still twitching from the burning sensation that continued to excite her body. Su Yang slowly retrieved his wet hand from within her robes. He then licked his hand with a nonchalant expression. And when Lu Lifan saw him tasting her liquid, her body became even hotter. Your yin qi is surprising vigorous with energy," said Su Yang. "It'd be a waste to leave it alone." After saying those words, Su Yang laid Lu Lifan's exhausted body on the bed. "Let me clean you up," he said with a smile. Lu Lifan did not understand the meaning behind his words at first, but when he began taking off her underwear, her heart raced even faster. After stripping Lu Lifan of her underwear, Su Yang lifted her robes, revealing to him her soaking wet pussy. And although Lu Lifan was nervous, she didn't say anything to him and allowed him to do as he pleased. Su Yang then spread open her legs and approached the slit between her legs with his mouth. "Yeah." Lu Lifan moaned loudly when she felt something warm lick her pussy. What is he doing?" She lifted her head, and the scene of Su Yang licking her slit entered her view. Ugh. The tingling sensation caused her to moan, and her body fell back on the bed, feeling as though all of the strength in her body was being absorbed by a mysterious force. After licking clean the yin qi from outside her cave, Su Yang proceeded to open her closed lips with his fingers, and his tongue began brushing her pink. Feeling something entering her tight cave, Lu Lifan trembled from the intense euphoric feeling in her body. "More. Lick it more," Lu Lifan said in an alluring voice. Hearing her passionate plea, Su Yang pushed his entire tongue into her tight cave. "Yes." A few moments later, Lu Lifan could feel the peeing sensation returning. "It's here again. I am going to release my yin qi," she exclaimed loudly, hoping Su Yang would move away from her warning. However, Su Yang did not move even after her warning, and he continued to pleasure her with his mouth. "I'm coming," Lu Lifan suddenly said, and her body began twitching vigorously. A second later, her body released a mouthful of holy water that went directly into Su Yang's mouth. Lu Lifan covered her face as she moaned loudly. A few moments later, Su Yang removed his mouth from her bottom lips, and he swallowed all the yin qi in his mouth. The instant he absorbed the yin qi, Su Yang could feel his cultivation base slightly rise. Although it wasn't anything significant, there was a clear sign of growth in his cultivation. HAAA. HAA. Hs. Lu Lifan breathed in an exhausted manner. For her to experience such intense pleasure constantly, even releasing her yin qi 2 times with almost no breaks in between, her virgin body was nearly out of energy at this moment. However, despite feeling tired, Lu Lifan still managed to lift herself to a sitting position on the bed. Are all the disciples in this place like you? And to think that you are only an inner court disciple? Lu Lifan couldn't imagine how blissful she would feel if a core disciple displayed his techniques when an inner court disciple like Su Yang was already this skillful. Haha. Su Yang suddenly burst out laughing. Don't compare me with the amateurs in this place. Although I am only an inner court disciple, my techniques are without a doubt the best in this world, let alone this sect meant for children. Lu Lifan looked at him with an unbelievable face. Although she couldn't compare his techniques with another, she had a feeling that he was not being arrogant at all. Anyway, I have released my yin qi, it's now my turn to help you, said Lu Lifan, who was no longer feeling as bashful. After allowing Su Yang to do something like licking her treasured area, her sense of shame had reached a new high. Come lay on the bed and allow me to please you, she said while patting the bed. Su Yang smiled and said, although I have no expectations for a virgin like you who couldn't even satisfy yourself, I am interested in what you'll do. He then laid on the bed and waited for her to make her move. Lu Lifan stared at Su Yang, who was resting on the bed with a relaxed expression, looking as though he was taking a nap. How can he be so calm in such a situation? She wondered to herself, feeling as though her pride was damaged by his nonchalant demeanor. Her hands began reaching for his robes, loosening the silk belt around his waist. She then grabbed his pants and pulled it down slowly, revealing a soft-looking graceful snake that was seemingly in a slumber. This is Lu Lifan's first time witnessing a man's penis, and she was slightly taken aback by its shape that resembled a flawless piece of sausage. But why is it flaccid? It's different from the rumors. Although she had never witnessed a man's treasure in her life until today, her friends had taught a thing or two about it to her, yet the thing before her eyes was completely different from her friend's description. If you keep staring at it, it might jump and bite you, said Su Yang, who was falling asleep from the silent atmosphere. Lu Lifan was slightly baffled by his words. It will jump and bite her? Does it work like that? But what am I supposed to do with that? She asked him in a puzzled voice. It's all limp, unlike what I've heard. Then what have you heard? That it's supposed to be hard and savage-looking? But yours is cute and limp. Su Yang didn't know whether to laugh or cry when Lu Lifan called his little brother cute. You mean like this? Su Yang controlled the qi in his body, and his slumbering brother began growing longer and thicker like a rising snake, until it resembled a dragon. Lu Lifan gasped at the shape-shifting phenomenon that happened before her very eyes, and the idiom, a carp leaping through the dragon gate, appeared in her head, but in this case it was a snake that had entered the dragon gate, evolving into a real dragon. The thing before her was no longer a slumbering snake but an awakened dragon instead. So big. Lu Lifan mumbled, and her fair hands unconsciously reached for it. A slightly cool sensation entered Su Yang's head, but his face showed no other reaction besides profound calmness. Seemingly fascinated by the shape and its very existence, Lu Lifan began stroking the stiff, warm rod in her hands gently. Hey, you really are trash. Su Yang sighed when she stroked his little brother whilst it was dry. It can't be helped as it is my first time doing this, she refuted, using her inexperience as an excuse. I am not talking about your techniques. Before you touch it, you should at least make it wet, or else the dry rubbing will hurt the individual, he said, baffling her. It works like that? But how am I supposed to... Before she could even finish her own sentence, Her quick mind recalled how he had helped her with his mouth, causing her to feel perplexed. Do I really have to use my mouth? Is there no other way? She wondered. However, as hesitant as she was towards the situation, the very nature of her body was intrigued by the opposite sex, even desiring to experience what a man would taste like. And slowly, the female hormones in her body began overtaking her mind, causing her mouth to approach the thick stick before her eyes, with her tongue slightly sticking out, looking as though she was licking ice cream. When the tip of her tongue touched the hot stick, her body trembled from excitement, and a strong sense of lust surged within her heart. Lu Lifan began licking every inch of the meat stick in her hands, quickly soaking the entire thing with her saliva. Che. Her intensive licking caused her to be out of breath within moments, forcing her to take a break. However, even as her mouth separated from the thick stick, her gaze continued to linger on it, seemingly ensnared by its tyrannical presence. After she regained her breath, her mouth approached the treat again. Su Yang, who was still resting on the bed with his eyes closed, suddenly felt something warm and soft envelope his little brother. He opened his eyes and lifted his head to look at Lu Lifan, who had managed to stuff his entire thick rod into her mouth. The scene of Lu Lifan swallowing his entire penis had caused him to feel surprised, as he didn't expect her to be so ferocious as a maiden. Lu Lifan's movements stopped when she realized what she had done. Her mouth was full, and she even felt its frame in her throat. However, despite doing something this ridiculous, there was a sense of comfort in her body, feeling as though such actions was only natural for her. Lights flamikronem. Soon she began moving her head in an up-and-down motion, causing the small room to be filled with gagging sounds. While Lu Lifan served Su Yang with intensive and deep fellatio service, he stared at her with a weird look. It was an expression someone would have when their expectations had been surpassed. As for Lu Lifan, she was completely absorbed in satisfying her awakened lust at this moment, seemingly in a trance. Time passed quickly, and unbeknownst to her, half an hour had passed. During this time, even Lu Lifan herself couldn't comprehend where all this energy was coming from that allowed her to continuously suck on Su Yang's penis. There were times when her energy almost ran out, but before it could completely vanish, more energy would surge within her body out of the blue, almost as though there was something helping her recover. Little did she know that this was all Su Yang's doing. Every once in a while before her energy would exhaust, he would exert some of his profound qi through his penis and into her mouth, helping her recover. As for why he was going through the effort by helping her keep her energetic, it was simple. He really enjoyed her intensive but amateurish deep throats. It reminded him of someone in his past life who really enjoyed intensive acts like this. Although Su Yang has had his little brother sucked countless times in his past life, there were only a few individuals that would dare to take it all in their mouth, and seeing Lu Lifan, who has never participated in sexual acts prior to today, willing to swallow his treasure whole, he was without a doubt impressed. HAAA. A minute later, Lu Lifan finally decided to stop. She then looked at Su Yang, who was laying on the bed comfortably with an unpleasant expression, and said, "When are you going to release your yang qi? I have been doing this embarrassing act for what felt like an eternity, you know." But despite her complaints, she was actually just displeased by the fact that she wasn't able to make him release his yang qi whilst he easily made her release her yin qi within minutes. Oh, I nearly forgot about it, he casually chuckled. As someone with godlike skills in the art of pleasure, if he didn't want to release his yang qi, even if he was feeling pleasure, he could easily hold it for as long as he desired. And it's this perfect control over his own body that differentiates Su Yang from every other disciple within the Profound Blossom sect, even other men in general. His control with his own yang qi was beyond perfect and almost limitless, whilst everybody else would only be able to hold it for a few minutes at most before being forced to ejaculate. But are you sure you want me to release my yang qi now? Even though you were so engrossed in satisfying yourself just now? Once I release it, we will be done here, and you may never receive another chance to fully satisfy yourself ever again. You talk as if you are the only man in this world. Even without you, I will be able to satisfy myself after today, Lu Lifan said. Su Yang smiled at her words and he nodded. Very well, if that is what you wish. Wait, Lu Lifan suddenly shouted. Despite my words, since we are already here today, I might as well satisfy myself to the fullest, right? My family did pay a hefty price to bring me here today, after all. About that, the Profound Blossom sect will be returning to everyone what they paid for the event, said Su Yang, dumbfounding her. What? Why would they do that? Lu Lifan asked, looking baffled by the news. Never mind the small details, he said with a smile. Anyway, do you still wish to continue, or are we finished here? Of course, we are not finished here. And we will not be finished until I manage to make you release your yang qi, as that was my original intent. Once I experience something for an extended amount of time and it stops, it'll only get harder to please me if you return to it, he said with a slight shoulder shrug. Lu Lifan stared at him with a pondering expression. After another moment, she spoke. I still have other places I can please you with, you know, she said as she lifted her dress, revealing to him her soaking wet undergarment. Su Yang smiled and said, Are you sure? Do I really have to repeat myself? Are you even a man? She replied in a cheeky tone. The smile on Su Yang's face instantly disappeared at her words, and when Lu Lifan saw this, her body trembled from a dreadful feeling. Very well. I shall show you why a maiden like you shouldn't be so cheeky in front of me when we are on the same bed. He then stood up on the bed and stripped away all of his clothes, dazzling Lu Lifan with his flawless figure. You should strip as well since it will only get in the way, he said in a calm yet domineering voice. Lu Lifan forcefully swallowed her saliva, wondering what she'd just gotten herself into. Light's novel. Too slow. Su Yang's arms suddenly flickered, disappearing from his sides for an instant. Lu Lifan felt her body suddenly become lighter, so she looked down. What? She was shocked to find out that almost all of her clothes had disappeared. Her dress was gone, and even the undergarment for her breasts was gone. The only thing on her body at this moment was a mere piece of wet underwear that revealed the shape of her bottom lips. Lu Lifan then looked at the thing that was in Su Yang's grasps, and sure enough, it was her clothes. How did he manage to strip her almost naked in an instant? Hell, she didn't even realize that she had been stripped even though he did it right before her eyes. You! How? Before she could even say another word, Su Yang pressed her down to the bed and seductively stared at her in the eyes. And almost instantly after her back touched the bed, Lu Lifan could feel a gentle air blow past her legs. If she had to take an educated guess, then she was completely naked at this moment from her head to the toes. Last warning, he said to her. Despite feeling a bit dazed at the situation, Lu Lifan still spoke with a grin on her face. Not twice, but 3 times? You really are a pansy. Ewa. Before Lu Lifan could even finish her sentence, she felt something enormous and long enter her body through the pink between her legs, and her body overflowed with an indescribable sense of pleasure, forcing an ear-piercing moan out of her. Blood dripped and stained the white bed, indicating that Lu Lifan had really lost her virginity. Lu Lifan continued to moan loudly as the intense heat in her body did not pause. Su Yang did not stop moving his hips despite just tearing her seal, even hitting her harder than any of his previous partners, yet there was not even the slightest sign of pain on Lu Lifan's delightful face. Her eyes were rolled all the way back, and her slim body curved upwards like a bridge. Clearly, she didn't mind Su Yang being rough with her, even finding it extremely pleasing with her body screaming with lust. Lu Lifan is obviously someone who naturally enjoys rough sex to some extent, but she herself wasn't aware of this, except Su Yang, who easily saw through her very nature, hence why he decided to do it rougher than usual. Soon, the small cave-like room echoed with sounds of ecstasy endlessly. Lust flooded through Lu Lifan's whole body. Her blood burned with passion, and all of her reason was washed away by the waves of pleasure viciously hitting her body, slowly becoming a slave for pleasure. Ah! 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 More! Faster! Harder! Ah! Fast! Time passed slowly as the two indulged themselves in pleasure, And unbeknownst to Lu Lifen, many hours had passed since she entered the chamber of embrace. During this time, her pink hole has naturally shaped itself to fit the frame of Su Yang's rod perfectly, flawlessly wrapping itself around him to ensure that the both of them were enjoying each other to the fullest. Ha! Aya! Lu Lifen moaned, releasing her yin qi for the countless time. Su Yang continued to transfer his profound qi to her during this whole time, recovering her energy as their session grew more intensive as time passed. Unlike his dual cultivation with Lan Liqing, who was a cultivator at the true spirit realm, Lu Lifen was only at the profound spirit realm, so her energy was extremely limited. If it weren't for Su Yang's constant support, both her body and voice would have long exhausted itself. More. 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 Lu Lifen begged for more, and the two continued to cultivate without stop. Outside the chamber of embrace, everybody from the guests to the profound Blossom sect disciples was staring at the chamber Su Yang and Lu Lifen entered at this moment, their mind filled with shock and awe. How long have they been inside? Someone within the crowd asked. They've been in there since the start of the event and it's almost coming to an end. What the hell are they doing inside? Surely, it shouldn't take this long for them to finish. Did they perhaps fall asleep inside? The two of them basically locked this one room for themselves for 2 days straight, reducing the total rooms by one for everybody else. How shameless. While the guests wondered why it was taking so long for Su Yang and Lu Lifen to come back out, the profound Blossom sect disciples stared at the entrance with frowning expressions. Even Lu Lanji was staring with a serious expression. As disciples of the profound Blossom sect, they all knew how the Chamber of Embrace functioned to some extent. The Chamber of Embrace does not allow people to sleep in there and will automatically open its entrance even if one of them falls asleep for more than an hour, said one of the inner court disciples to the others. And they cannot stay idle inside without cultivating, since the Chamber of Embrace will also automatically open up if neither of them releases chi within 5 hours, said another. So the only reason why they are not coming out is simply because one of them has yet to release their chi ever since they went inside. What? Impossible. There is no way anybody can endure this long. For 2 whole days? That is physically impossible. Gu Wei exclaimed loudly in disbelief. He was not the only one. Every other disciple, even Lu Lanji, was feeling doubt at this moment. That brat Su Yang released his yang qi only a few minutes after we started during our time together, so could it be that young lady the reason why they are still inside? Lu Lanji pondered. However, she quickly found this reason to be even less likely, as she had experienced his divine techniques herself before. It's impossible for Su Yang to be unable to satisfy this young lady who is clearly a maiden when his techniques had easily conquered even my experienced body, Lu Lanji thought to herself. Just what the hell are they doing inside? Everybody, except a few poor individuals, waiting outside have already had their experience inside the Chamber of Embrace, so it was only Su Yang and Lu Lifen that has to finish their session. Li Xiaomo sighed at the situation. She had been approached by almost every guest here for the past 2 days, yet she declined all of them without a single thought, so she was one of the few here that has yet to enter the Chamber of Embrace. Just what are you doing inside, Su Yang? She wondered to herself, her face filled with a gloomy feeling. When the other inner court disciples saw her condition, they almost wanted to approach her and give her a hug, but knowing her character when she's in a bad mood, none of them dared to actually approach her. Through a few more minutes of waiting around, a rumbling sound came from the Chamber of Embrace, causing everyone there to turn their heads. The only closed door finally opened after 2 whole days, and a figure slowly walked out. It's him. He's finally out after 2 days, someone exclaimed in excitement. It was Su Yang, and he looked completely normal. Hell, if they compared him now to when he first went inside 2 days ago, there wouldn't be any noticeable change about him no matter how much they looked. His clothes were speckless, and his long black hair was still neatly tied behind his back, looking as though he'd only went on a stroll. What the fuck? Does he look like someone who just had sex for 2 days straight? Someone asked out loud. People silently shook their heads at the question. Hell, he doesn't even look like someone who'd taken a nap, let alone have sex for 2 days straight. Seeing his clean appearance, the people's doubt grew and their curiosity piqued. Just what did he do inside for the last 2 days? Huh? What happened to the young girl that was with him? Asked another. When someone questioned about Lu Lifen, the old man that came with her frowned deeply. He then jumped through the crowd and landed in front of Su Yang. "Where is my young lady?" he said with an intimidating air surrounding him. With a smile, Su Yang spoke. "She's resting in heaven now." When the old man heard his words, his expression blanked for an instant. His eyes then quickly turned red from fury, and the cultivation base of a true spirit realm exploded from within his body with his head reduced to a red-faced, wrathful mess.